Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is parallel in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, Thinking on Your Feet. Sizing up his opponent was easy. Sasuke had taught Koji how to do that. Whoever this kid was, looking dirty and half dead on his feet, he was projecting a hidden strength Koji had to be wary of. What had Koji concerned was, the kid just looked sick. Sweat dripped off of him, landing in droplets on the floor. He heard someone yell out, yelling the kid's name before he finally raised his head. You are of the Akimichi clan. Your movements will be slow, yet powerful. I cannot let them touch me. With his arm, the kid wiped the sweat off his brow. He looked down, watching as the droplets hit the floor. My name is Raiko. We have come a long way to fight, but you are not the target I require. Lucky for you, this match will be over soon. Holding his arms in front of him, palms down, Raiko pulled the droplets from the floor. They hovered in the air, shimmering in the artificial lighting, before shooting toward Koji. Dropping to the floor, Koji hugged the ground as the droplets hit the wall behind him. Cement dust plumed out around them. The water was hard enough to embed itself into the wall. A kunai flew out of the dust, heading straight for Raiko's head. Tilting his head to the side, the kunai whizzed past him, the point getting buried in the wall. As the dust died down, a large hand shot out from what was left of it. Koji stormed forward, large hand squeezed into a fist. Raiko ducked, the fist cracking the cement wall, leaving a large crater. When the hand retracted, the Kiri Genin began to laugh. However, he soon found it hard to breathe. The kunai Koji had previously thrown was grasped tightly in his, now normal-sized, hand. Tied to the handle was razor-thin ninja wire. Koji had used his punch to wrap it around Raiko's throat. All that could be seen of it was it glinting in the light and the indentation it made around the pale boy's neck. Pulling it in small increments, Koji slowly constricted Raiko's breathing, slowly turning the boy's face blue. First Raiko hit his knees, grasping at the wire with blunt nails. Then, once his eyes rolled back in his head, the boy fell flat on his face. Raiko was unconscious. Leaning down to check the boy, Hayate stood back up and waved in the medics. Winner, Koji. The girls cheered, yelling his name. Shikamaru turned to Sasuke, both nodding at each other. Naruto bounced on his heels, shouting Koji's name. Once he made his way up the stairs and onto the balcony, Koji was surrounded by the girls, all hugging him. His face was red when they let him go. Good job, Koji. Asuma clapped him on the back. You did amazing. Sasuke vs Nobu, Hayate called out. Naruto turned around, looking Sasuke straight in the eyes. Do not use your chakra. You're strong enough without it. I'm serious, Sasuke. You'll tear my seal off. That includes the Sharingan. Kakashi supplied, patting him on the back. You'll have to go back to your roots. A searing pain shot through him, making his knees weak and his teeth grit together. Sasuke grabbed at his shoulder and squeezed his eyes shut, hissing through the pain. He knew what he would see when he opened his eyes. His team asking him to forfeit, calling him weak, thinking he can't handle anything. Hey! Naruto poked him in the chest. When Sasuke looked at him, he just saw Naruto giving him a lopsided smile. When you're done whining, your opponent is waiting. Sasuke just blinked. They weren't telling him to give up? Relief flooded through him. Go, bastard. Don't embarrass us. Sasuke huffed out a laugh before lightly smacking Naruto upside the head. Moron. His opponent, Nobu, had an IWA headband tied around his neck and brown hair in a mohawk. The boy stood with one hand on his hip and the other pointing at Sasuke. He's sick, or hurt, or something. I want a new opponent. I want an actual challenge. Sasuke, can you fight? He nodded at Hayate. Okay, then let's get this over with. Completely ignoring the complaints Nobu was still yelling out, Hayate called for the match to start. The brown-haired boy looked at Sasuke and shrugged. It's your funeral. Then, with a smirk, he added, you're an Uchiha, right? So you already know all about funerals. It was a low blow. It was Nobu's attempt at psyching Sasuke out. He vaguely heard Naruto yell something out, but Sasuke's attention was centered on Nobu. He would enjoy kicking this kid's ass. Then the shooting pain happened again. It hit hard enough that it sent Sasuke to his knees. By the time the pain died down and Sasuke could focus again, the boy was gone. There was no trace of him. Until something connected with his jaw, sending Sasuke flying up in the air. Nobu had come out of the ground, right below Sasuke. When he landed, flat on his back, Nobu had already ducked under the ground again. It went on like that, Sasuke trying to figure out where Nobu would come out next. The kid was too fast, had no pattern to discern, and was keeping Sasuke off balance. Over and over again Nobu would pop out of the ground, land a hit, and dive back under. Sasuke had barely gotten off a handful of hits, and none of them were enough to slow the kid down. A knee-jerk reaction of pulling his Sharingan out only aggravated the seal further. The pain caused him to miss Nobu coming back out of the ground, getting a hard hit on Sasuke's rib cage, and causing him to slide backward. He had to do something, anything. Sasuke couldn't pull a lot of chakra, but he could get just a bit. Just a hint. Not enough to do much with. Barely enough to activate a seal. Jolting, Sasuke remembered a long-forgotten seal he and Naruto had created way back when they still lived in Kakashi's apartment. Digging through his pouch, Sasuke's fingers closed over the piece of sealing paper. The tension eased out of his stance as he stood still, letting Nobu come to him. This would be easy, now. As Nobu surfaced, Sasuke slapped the seal on the first piece of exposed skin he saw. Still half in the ground, Nobu froze, eyes wide and face slack. The Genjutsu seal wouldn't last long since Sasuke could only use a small hit of chakra, but it would last long enough. Grabbing Nobu by the hair, Sasuke pulled him out of the ground. Before the kid could come back to himself, Sasuke had to keep him off the ground. Training with Lee gave him an idea of how he could do that. Blinking, Nobu looked around, confused. When his eyes focused, Sasuke was standing in front of him, arm pulled back and fist at the ready. He tilted to the side in an attempt to miss the punch, instead getting in the perfect position for Sasuke to slide across the ground and kick Nobu straight up in the air. In the end, the move almost resembled Lee's hidden lotus, but not quite. It was Sasuke's spin, his Uchiha flare, that sent the boy crashing, head first, into the hard ground. As Nobu lay there, not moving, Sasuke leaned over him. Don't talk about the Uchiha clan ever again. A swift kick of his sandal to the temple sent Nobu into unconsciousness. Winner, Sasuke. It surprised no one when the squirrely Iwa Genin lost to the Kiri girl with the huge trident. Sakura's eyes were focused on it and the lightning that could arc across the metal. She couldn't gush about it for long, however, because the match was over almost as soon as it started. Hate turned to the television, waiting for the next matchup to flash on the screen. Gaara vs Hinata. The Konoha side of the room went deathly silent. They all turned to look at Hinata. In an instant, Naruto was in front of her. Hinata. Don't do this. Forfeit. His blue eyes were wild. Please, Hinata. Trust me. I have been training hard, Naruto. She had a look in her eyes, a pressing need to prove herself in the eyes of everyone. I want to fight. Something akin to panic bubbled up in Naruto. With a quick glance toward his team, Naruto pulled the girl aside. Sasuke, Sakura, and Team 10 all looked at each other, but didn't interfere. I know you want to fight, Hinata. I'm not saying you're weak. I believe in you. Shikamaru had told him Hinata wouldn't care. Shikamaru told him Hinata wouldn't be scared. If it would help convince her? I am the Jinchuriki for Konoha. A gasp left Hinata. I have the Kyuubi, Kurama. He can sense another Baijuyu inside Gaara. The seal is broken and it's in Gaara's head. He's too dangerous. Thank you for telling me, Naruto. Hinata gave him a small smile. But I want to fight. I have trained so hard. Let me show it. With a determined look in her eyes, Hinata walked past everyone and headed down the stairs. Gaara was already there, waiting, with his arms crossed. His pale green eyes bore into Hinata as she stood across from him. The small girl with the timid eyes was not a threat. Gaara watched as the girl turned around and looked up at the crowd. A boy with the same eyes as her nodded. Whatever they said without words seemed to bolster the girl's spirit. She stood up straight and dropped into a fighting stance. "We need more blood." Mother's voice echoed through his head. "Make her bleed." Gaara didn't want to kill, again. That stupid kid in the forest deserved to bleed for Mother. He wouldn't let them alone. This girl was too weak. She wasn't a challenge. Mother still wanted blood. She was getting excited. "Start." The proctor started the match, but Gaara stayed still. He didn't have to move. Mother would protect him. The sand worked for him. The small girl took a deep breath before veins popped out around her eyes. A Jujutsu. Interesting. His chakra reached for his sand, making it swirl around him. The small girl hadn't moved. She was trying to read him. "We need blood." Nothing else would make Mother happy, now. She was getting excited. Gaara knew it wouldn't be long before her voice would drown out his thoughts. He had to work fast. A tendril of sand shot toward her, but she hit it with her palm. The sand rained down to the ground before skittering back toward Gaara. Another tendril shot toward her, stronger, sharper, but she deflected it as well. "You are not worth my effort." He tried to ignore Mother's voice in his head yelling for blood. "It makes no difference if you fight or not, you will not win." The next tendril he shot out was easy for her to deflect. It was the one that came from underground that got her. Gaara watched as the small girl flew through the air and landed on her back. Someone yelled from up on the balcony, but Gaara paid no mind. They were not important. The girl laying on the ground was his concern. She wasn't moving. Was she dead? Mother was getting excited, again. Mother was calling for blood. The girl, very slowly, got to her feet. Mother hissed in his head, complaining about Gaara's weakness. It was something he heard often. Gaara didn't want to kill. Mother saw that as a weakness. The girl was dropping into her fighting stance again. She still wanted to fight. Didn't she realize it was futile? The girl kept attacking, over and over, even though it was useless. Her attacks were not hurting Gaara, were not doing anything but leaving her open for attack. She didn't have the skill set to fight him. Mother was getting louder and louder in his head. No matter what he did, this girl kept getting up. Mother was screaming. She had already seen Gaara draw blood. The girl had crimson trailing down her face, dripping onto her jacket. Mother wanted more. "I tried to spare you." Gaara stood still as the girl pushed herself up, arms and legs shaking. "You should have stayed down." He winced as Mother demanded more. Mother must be appeased. He gathered the sand in front of him in a huge ball. From the center a large fist broke through, heading straight for the girl. This was it. She would not get up again. The sound of chirping birds echoed through the tower as a mix of bright white and bright blue lightning cut through the sand. When it dispersed, dropping back onto the floor, a Jounin stood in front of the girl. Gaara expected hate to be in the ninja's eyes. The only visible eye had a look of sadness. Is that what that emotion is? He couldn't think too well through Mother's yelling in his head. A hand clapped down on his shoulder as the proctor announced the match over. A female Jounin jumped down, leading the girl away from the battle area and toward medics that were standing off to the side. They sat her on a stretcher before leading the girl away. Gaara didn't want the girl to die, he just wanted her to stay down. That lightning, however, his eyes snapped back to the Jounin who had stopped his attack. What jutsu was that? Winner, Gaara. Hate announced a 5-minute break as they repaired the floor. Earth-style ninja worked at resetting the cracks and divots created by the previous matches. Naruto hung his head, feeling responsible for Hinata's pain. Kurane-sensei came back in, giving everyone a rundown on Hinata's injuries. Broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, pulled tendon in her calf, every additional injury made Naruto feel worse. Don't do this to yourself. Kakashi put an arm around the boy's shoulders. You did what you could. You told her the truth. What happens after that is not your fault. Sakura hooked her arm through his, holding Naruto close against her. Hinata will be fine. Nothing she has going on requires more than a medic to treat. You didn't cause this, Naruto. Sasuke stood on the other side of Sakura, elbows on the railing. Hinata chose to fight. She wanted to show that she could. She did really good, Sakura said with a smile. From what she started with to how she is now. That was damn good. Another hand, softer, gentler, tugged at Naruto's other arm. When he turned his head, Kurane-sensei had knelt down beside Naruto. Sweetheart, listen to me. Hinata chose to fight because she wanted to prove to herself she could. It wouldn't have mattered what any of us said, she still would have gone. This isn't your fault. This isn't my fault. This isn't anyone's fault. Hinata chose to fight. She got hurt. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed together. She didn't have to do that. No one would have been mad or upset if she didn't fight. A soft hand gently cupped his cheek. She would have been upset. It didn't placate Naruto by much, but the boy did not. Kurane patted his cheek before standing up. Listen up. Hayate yelled out, voice rising above the buzz of the crowd. The winners of these next matches will move on to the finals. The finals will be held 1 month from tomorrow. You will know who your opponent is before you leave here today. The screen flickered behind him, the names of the next match lighting up. Koji and Fu. There was an excited yell before a girl with green hair and orange eyes leaped off the balcony. She landed, gracefully, on the battle area before throwing up a fist. Yes. I'm so ready. Kid. Naruto jolted when Kurama talked. He sounded so much closer, now. His voice was louder, as if right next to Naruto's ear. That girl, she's like you. She holds Kome. Warn your pudgy friend. Koji. Naruto turned around, catching the boy before he made it to the stairs. That girl is like me. Be careful. Koji's eyes widened a bit before he nodded. Thanks, Naruto. As the boy made his way back to the battle area, Kiba noticed how Shino stiffened. Yo, what's wrong, Shino? That girl's chakra. It feels like bug-style ninjutsu. Why? Shino looked at Kiba out of his peripheral vision, seeing the Inuzuka shrug. It's strange. Kiba snorted. A lot about you is strange, Shino. That doesn't surprise me. He clapped Shino on the shoulder. When the fight is over, you can ask her. She might tell you, who knows. After a beat, he added, how's Hinata? She will be okay. She is proud of herself. Before Hinata was taken away, Shino had hidden an insect on her jacket. The team may not be able to follow her, but they deserved to know what was going on. As she should be. Kiba nodded in agreement. On the other side of the balcony, Naruto was filling in his team about the third Jinchuriki in the room. He kept sending nervous glances in Koji's direction, afraid the boy got hurt as Hinata did. But this girl seems different. She doesn't feel tormented as Gaara does. It's almost as if she's happy with her Baijuyu. Her Baijuyu is Kome. Nanabe, as you humans call him. Kurama sighed. Some of the Baijuyu stop fighting and just become friendly with their vessels. It's humiliating. Naruto tilted his head, considering Kurama's words. Wasn't Kurama friendly with him? He'd helped Naruto stop the red chakra, tried to help stop the pain it was causing. Shut up, brat. I only did that because I didn't want you using my chakra. It had nothing to do with you. Smirking, Naruto let the grumpy fox believe what he wanted to. Down on the battle area, Fu was humming with restless energy. Kome was trying to be a calming presence, but Fu was already too far gone. She was bouncing from one foot to the other, shaking out her arms and stretching her neck. I've got this. I've got this. When Koji finally took his spot across from her, she smiled at him. You did great in the first fight. I really enjoyed watching it. Thanks. Koji wasn't sure if the girl was telling the truth or not, but he gave her a small smile back. Are you ready? Fu nodded, very enthusiastically. Hayate stepped up, looked at each kid. All right, start. Fu was fast. Before Hayate finished his sentence, she was beside Koji, ready to strike. Had he not spent time training with Sasuke, Koji would have been thrown against the wall. But Sasuke worked on his speed, and how fast his reaction time was. Ducking at the last second, Fu's round kick buzzed over his head. Koji threw his leg out, catching enough of Fu's ankle to throw off her balance. Instead of falling, the girl just backflipped out of the way. Before she fully righted herself, Koji threw shuriken at her feet, making her push into another flip to avoid them. With chakra pushed to his feet, Koji ran to where she would land, ready for a kick. Instead, Koji felt himself become weightless, lifted off the ground. All around him was a shiny netting he didn't even see coming. He kicked, grabbed at the net, ripped with his nails, but nothing worked. It held tight, holding him off the ground while being suspended by connecting to the ceiling. Something was pulling at his chakra, draining it out of him. It was the netting, it was absorbing chakra. Before he was entirely drained, Koji grew his body, pushing the netting to its limit. Slowly, the holes got bigger and bigger until the netting began to snap. He could see Fu holding her hands out, trying to stop him from breaking the netting, but Koji was growing too fast. Her orange eyes were wide as she took in his new size. "Oh, shit!" Fu exclaimed, jumping back as a fist cratered the ground. She watched as he reeled back for another hit. He was slower in this form. Well, she could use that to her advantage. Forming the hand signs for her scale powder technique, she blew the fine substance from her mouth. The area filled up with a powder that shined so bright, Koji was forced to shield his eyes. The people on the balcony hid their eyes, also. Pulling just a bit of Komei's chakra, Fu leveled Koji with a hit that sent his overgrown body backward. He landed with a loud thud that forced his body back to its original size. The chakra that was absorbed by the netting combined with what he used with the multi-size technique had the boy running low. Combine that with his inability to see, and Fu's next attack completely knocked the boy unconscious. Standing up, Fu threw up her fists. Until she remembered that no one could see her in the bright light. It was beginning to clear up, so all Fu could do at this point was wait. When Hayate could finally see, he walked over to check on Koji before waving in the medics. Winner, Fu. Niji honestly thought his fight with Kiba would be easy. When their names were called, Niji cockily strutted down the stairs and took the far side of the battle area. With his arms crossed, he waited as Kiba and Akamaru took their places across from him. "You are so going down, Niji." Kiba was cocky. It was always his downfall during training. He'd overcompensate, as he always did during taijutsu training. It was then that Niji realized he'd never actually seen Kiba do his family's jutsu. He knew, abstractly, what they could do, but he'd never witnessed it. Well, maybe the cocky kid had won over on Niji after all. Start. From up on the balcony, Ino leaned in close to Sakura. "Wanna take bets?" "Winner makes dinner." She watched as Sakura smirked from beside her. "Kiba wins." "What?" Her green eyes were wide as she looked at Ino. "Are you serious?" "No, Niji will win." Ino shrugged. "Guess we will see." "I want homemade sushi, by the way." Sakura frowned. "Are you two betting on your teammates?" The girls didn't even look sorry when they glanced at Asuma. "I can't believe you two." He gave them both a stern look. "Didn't your sensei teach you better? You need to give parameters to your bet, so whoever loses can't wiggle out of it." Punching Asuma in the arm, Kurane shot him a dirty look. "That is not how you reprimand students, Asuma. You need to lead by example." She leaned forward. "Ino, honey, when Kiba wins, Sakura can still say the bet was only friendly and doesn't count. Make sure you shake on it. Make it official. Both of you are terrible." Kakashi chuckled. Within moments of the fight starting, the battle area was destroyed. Kiba combined his earth release with Fang over Fang and made molehills and tunnels underground. Niji's palm rotation was causing round craters all over. Realizing early that he wasn't familiar with Inuzuka clan jutsu, Niji knew that if Kiba played this smart, he could easily keep Niji from getting a good hit on him. But, that was a big if. Niji knew that Kiba was cocky, that he overestimated his abilities. This whole match could be over before it began if Kiba kept that mindset. However, Kiba seemed to have learned some humility and patience. He and Akamaru worked well together, coordinating attacks to give them the most advantage. It took a long time, and a lot of chakra, for Niji to finally have Kiba where he wanted him. At the last minute, just as Niji was finishing up his 64 palms, Akamaru had substituted with Kiba. The pup was laying still, obviously hurt. Grabbing Akamaru, Kiba retreated underground. Niji took a brief moment to assess himself. His hands were torn and blistered from Kiba's attacks and his own. His chakra was low, limiting his vision with the Byakugan. Realizing that if Kiba didn't attack him from straight on, he would be hard-pressed to react. When the ground began to rumble, Niji dropped into his stance, his legs were shaking and arm weak. Kiba was slower, his own chakra running low, as he drilled out of the ground and aimed for Niji. Slamming his abused hands into the oncoming attack, Niji broke through an earth clone. Another drill shot out toward him, sloppier than the last. Time and time again, Niji had proven that, unless the rotation was perfect, he could easily knock the Inyazuka out of it with one hit. The rotation may be impressive, but Niji's counter made every run hurt. Figuring this would be no different than any other time, Niji slammed his palm into the drill, only for it to pass right through. Genjutsu. Niji's face was slack with shock. Since when could Kiba do that? Before he could fully process what had just happened, the real Kiba slammed into him, sending them both landing hard into the ground. They both lay where they landed, out of breath and out of chakra. Now, it was down to whoever could get up first. The crowd watched them, waiting with bated breath, to see who would get up first. Kiba rolled over on his side, groaning, but that was all the further he got. Trying to push himself up, Niji planted a hand on the ground, only to hiss out when pain shot up his arm. Putting a knee under himself, Kiba tried to push himself up, again, but his legs gave out. He collapsed back on the ground with a thud. Niji rolled over, using his forearms to push him up. He managed to, shakily, get onto his knees. Kiba cursed, wrapping an arm around his middle, as he tried to get on his knees. His arms were shaking, barely able to hold his weight. Winner is whoever can get on their feet. Hate called out. The boys' eyes met before both giving it one last push. Kiba finally made it to his knees and Niji had one foot planted on the ground. By mere microseconds, Niji staggered to his feet first. With a smug look on her face, Sakura leaned over to Ino. I'm thinking curry. Winner, Niji. Earth-style Chiryunin fanned out, all scratching their heads as they tried to repair the floor. Kiba remained on his knees, watching as medics came rushing in and gingerly placed Akamaru on a small stretcher. Staggering over, Niji looked down at him. His victory was sweet, seeing as how hard he worked for it. I underestimated you, Inyazuka. Kiba looked up at him, cuts and scrapes all over his face. It almost cost me the match. It was an honor to face you, Kiba. Looking up at Niji, Kiba smirked. Yeah. He held out his hand, index and middle finger held up, the sign of reconciliation. It was good to face you, too, Hyuga. A small smile played on Niji's face as he returned the gesture, lightly hooking his two fingers around Kiba's. Then, extending his forearm, he helped Kiba to his shaky feet. After the boys had gone to the medics, and the floor was repaired, Hate took his spot again. The television flickered to life before two more names flashed on the screen. Shikamaru and Kankuro. Please, Shikamaru, actually give this an effort. Ino begged. You've trained so hard. With his hands in his pockets, Shikamaru walked past her. Troublesome woman. Koji hid his smirk in his bag of chips. Ino glared at his retreating back. Shikamaru, with his aloof attitude, stood opposite of Kankuro, hands still in his pockets. The large wrapped object on Kankuro's back made a rattling sound as he swung it off. It made a thud as the bottom hit the ground. Hate started the match and neither boy moved. With his hands still in his pockets, Shikamaru rolled his shoulders and leaned against the wall. Are you serious? Kankuro yelled out. Come at me. Fight. Shikamaru just shrugged. Well, if you won't make the first move, then I will. His puppet, Karasuo, was revealed when the wrappings slowly fell away. A ratty cloak covered a wooden body with 4 arms and 2 legs. On its wooden face were 3 unblinking eyes, the third of which was almost hidden under shaggy brown hair. With a twitch of his fingers, Chakra shot out, thin and thread-like. Karasa will make this fast. As the puppet came careening at him, Shikamaru hit his knees, barely missing the hit. One wooden fist made a dent in the cement wall behind him. When Kankuro pulled the puppet back, a very thin shadow followed. Ino was right, Shikamaru had trained hard. Now, he could stretch the shadows so thin you could barely see them. After making the connection, Shikamaru stood back up and resumed his position against the wall. You missed. From behind a one-way glass wall, Hiruzen felt Shikaku and Inoichi walk into the room. They were helping with the investigation into Orochimaru, but nothing said they couldn't take a moment to watch their children fight. With his arms crossed, Shikaku looked out at his son, standing against the wall with his hands in his pockets. The puppet attacked again and again, constantly seeming to miss by mere centimeters each time. It was just enough that his son would take a step to the side, or tilt his head away. He snorted, shaking his head at his son's antics. Tenten was amazed. She kept watching as Kankuro got more and more upset, his attacks becoming more and more uncoordinated. Oh my! Shikamaru is so skilled. He's just reading the attacks, dodging, he's dash. Asuma, Ino, and Koji all interrupted her. He's lazy. Ino rolled her eyes, laying her head on Sakura's shoulder. Asuma was pinching the bridge of his nose, realizing how brilliant Shikamaru was in using all his training to come up with an even lazier way to fight. Koji was smiling from ear to ear, proud of his best friend. Really? Looking from the fight to Asuma, Tenten looked surprised. But a large hand clamped onto her shoulder. Tenten, if there is a lazy way to do something, Shikamaru will figure it out. Asuma pointed over at Kankuro as he leaned down close to her ear. He's not reading anything. He's attached his shadows to the puppet. Kankuro thinks he's controlling it, but Shikamaru is using his shadows to alter the course at the last second. Her eyes widened. Yeah. He's fighting without fighting, the lazy brat. How has Puppet Man not figured it out yet? Ino sighed. Playing with Kankuro was fun and all, but Shikamaru was running out of chakra. He'd kept up the ruse longer than he thought, though. All that chakra reserve training was working. Now to put a stop to this puppet nonsense. Dropping down onto one knee, he put his hands together and thickened the shadow connecting him to the puppet. Tendrils of shadow branched out, wrapping around the multiple wooden arms. Shadow summoning connected successfully. With a smirk, he pulled the shadows, pulling the wooden arms straight out. Shikamaru watched as Kankuro's eyes widened, watching as the shadows pulled the arms harder and harder. Now to remove the issue. No. Wait. Kankuro yelled out. Cracking and popping could be heard before the arms came off, along with many tiny pieces flying around the battle area. Cursing, Kankuro threw his hands up as the rest of the puppet slowly fell apart, laying in a heap on the ground. The shadows maybe have been underestimated, Shikamaru realized. No matter how small, everything has a shadow. He may have miscalculated. Rubbing the back of his neck, Shikamaru offered an apology, but it wasn't well received. With a growl, the Sunatine came running, arm back and fist poised. He'd been training with Team 7 for long enough that Shikamaru knew how to dodge and retaliate. Ducking under Kankuro's fist, Shikamaru swept the teen's leg out from under him, sending Kankuro flying, face first, into the ground. Immediately, Kankuro grabbed at his nose and rolled over, blood spurting through the cracks in his fingers. He stayed on the ground, cursing and spitting out blood, as Hayate walked over. Do you concede? With a glare, Kankuro nodded. Hayate waved in the medics. Winner, Shikamaru. Shino and Sasuke. Hayate read the next match off the television screen. Kurane looked between the two boys. Oh, interesting matchup. She pat Shino on the back as he walked past. Naruto. Sasuke had done some very quick thinking. Although painful, he could pull a tiny bit of chakra. It should be just enough to activate a paper bomb. He'd have to rely on taijutsu and clever strategy to make it through. Do you have paper bombs? Kunao tags. Digging through his pouch, Naruto pulled out a storage scroll. Kneeling to the floor, Sasuke dug through the tools Naruto had stored away. Once he had his pouch stocked up, Sasuke thanked him. "Your seal dash. You have to trust me, idiot. I know what I'm doing." He met Naruto's eyes. "I won't break your seal." After a beat, Naruto nodded and worked on storing what Sasuke didn't take back into the scroll. Sakura bounced over, sword swaying on her back. "You've got this, Sasuke." She was rewarded with a small smile. The random attacks of pain his shoulder was having weren't coming as frequently. He'd gone the entire previous match without one. He could do this. "Sasuke." A familiar hand clamped down on his, unaffected, shoulder. "I am proud of you." His eyes met Kakashi's, seeing the sincerity there. Something warm settled in Sasuke's chest. He gave a sharp nod before making his way down the stairs. Shino had his hands in his pockets, waiting for the Uchiha to take his place. "I will not take it easy on you, Sasuke." "Why?" "Because that would not be fair to you. I wouldn't have it any other way." Sasuke readied his stance. He'd sparred with Shino in the academy, and the kid wasn't bad. A Barame style combined two types together and mixed in the insects. The problem with Shino, however, was that his bugs tended to protect him instinctively. They were willing to die to protect their master. So, if Sasuke thinned the numbers a bit. Once Hayate said they could start, Shino gathered his Kikaichu around him in a dome. Some broke off from the group, a tentacle of insects that shot out at Sasuke. Dodging out of the way, Sasuke threw a kunai towards Shino. A slight tilt of his head and the kunai embedded into the wall. "Where is he aiming?" Sakura asked, looking at the missed opportunity. It wasn't like Sasuke to miss. His ninja tool aim was impeccable. Is the seal messing with him that bad? Kakashi kept quiet as he watched Sasuke's plan unfold. 3 more kunai missed Shino, burying in the wall just as the first one did. Shino's bugs kept lashing out, trying to overwhelm Sasuke, but the Uchiha was fast. With Shino dodging the kunai, even slightly, was putting him exactly where Sasuke wanted him, increment by increment. Sliding to a stop, Sasuke threw the last kunai. As it whizzed past Shino, he heard it hissing. The insects barely had time to cover him before all the tags hanging off the previous kunai exploded. With Shino's horde of insects thinned out, and Shino off balance, Sasuke struck. He got a couple good hits in before the insects caught his ankle, throwing him across the arena. In the short time they had a hold of him, the Kikaichu had fed on his chakra. The pain in his neck seared through his skin, making Sasuke writhe on the ground. He knew he had precious little time to get back up before Shino capitalized on his weakness. Pushing himself up, forcing his body to fight through the pain, Sasuke got to his feet just in time to see a swarm of insects heading straight for him. A game of cat and mouse started, in which Shino tried to direct the swarm in Sasuke's direction, and Sasuke threw kunai trying to hit Shino. A couple kunai got close, slices showing in Shino's jacket and the tip of one ear. There weren't enough Kikaichu left to both protect Shino and chase Sasuke. They had to choose. It left gaps in Shino's defense. Every time a couple of the insects touched Sasuke, the seal gave a jolt as more chakra was drained from him. But Sasuke was learning. He knew, now, how much chakra he could pull before the seal kicked off. The balcony was buzzing with questions. Sakura wasn't sure what was going on. Naruto was biting his nails, hoping Sasuke didn't strain himself too much. Kakashi was impressed with Sasuke's ingenuity. In the center of the arena, with Sasuke dodging his insects and whipping kunai in, seemingly, random directions, Shino caught a vague glint of light. He barely had time to react, barely had time to appreciate the bruises and cuts and fatigue he was causing in Sasuke, before the Uchiha hurriedly blurred through hand signs. No. He can't use chakra. White and blue light flickered across the glinting ninja wire that surrounded him. The insects tried to cover him, tried to take the brunt of the attack, but there weren't enough of them. His limbs numbed before his vision faded to black. Pulling the ninja wire held in his teeth, Sasuke caught Shino before he fell. Just enough lightning to render Shino unconscious, it's all he needed. There was pain shooting up and down his left side, but he fought through it, forced himself to stay standing. What is he doing? Naruto was practically hanging over the balcony. Kakashi caught him by the back of his shirt, pulling him back. Did he break the seal? He said he'd use a tiny bit of chakra, not use his Dem Lightning. Not sure whether to be worried or angry, Naruto just wanted to grab Sasuke and shake him. That bastard. Slowly letting the ninja wire loose, Sasuke gently lay Shino on the ground. The boy wasn't lying. He did make Sasuke work for the win. There was a lot of strategizing, a lot of thinking on his feet, but Sasuke managed it in the end, and kept Naruto's seal intact. Even if the blonde was screaming at him from up on the balcony. He looked up, meeting Naruto's eyes, and smirked. It only made Naruto yell louder, practically pulling out of Kakashi's hands as he hung over the balcony. Hey, waved in the medics. Winner, Sasuke. Tenzo had just returned from a mission, and was already given another one. He had things to talk to Sandaime about, information the man would be interested in, but it would have to wait. A Sunin attacked Genin, all hell was breaking loose, and Danzo's child soldiers were playing retired Umbu. Commander Mushi had met him at the gate, letter directly from Kakashi in his hand. It gave Tenzo very specific orders that only he could do. That only Tenzo could possibly understand. The first Umbu he found, Eagle, had a very small agent sitting beside him. An ex-Umbu mask, Bobcat, sat on this child's face. They were in front of research and development, in the perfect position to watch the public entrance. He landed next to them, feet perched on a thick branch, his hand holding a thinner one above his head. Did you chase the rabbit? Not very far. Eagle answered the call sign. Chasing the rabbit was an expression they used for getting to the truth. By the answer, apparently Eagle hasn't gotten the reincarnation of Bobcat to talk very much. Tenzo nodded. Commander Mushi wants you to run the perimeter. I'll take over. Eagle flickered away, leaving the child seemingly confused. Hey. Tenzo settled in where Eagle just vacated. There was a moment of silence while Tenzo decided on a Danzo-specific call sign to use. He wanted to show the child they were trained by the same man. We, wear the same shoes, you and I. The small head snapped in his direction, the mask too big for their face. I had someone save me, someone you've recently met. You, Lord Danzo trained you. Trying to keep the shock out of his voice, Tenzo unclipped his mask. Yes, from a very young age. I'm Tenzo. The child sounded younger than he'd initially thought. Was he even academy age? Ori. The recently painted mask was slowly removed. We didn't know what else to do. Lord Danzo is dead. We had no orders. The boy had stark white hair and bangs that hung over his big, light gray, eyes. A scar started under his eye and ran down to his chin. Tenzo couldn't even imagine what that small boy had seen. Shiro said if we repainted the old masks, no one would know and then we would have orders. The feeling of being confused, of being lost, was terrifying. Tenzo knew that, intimately. Under Danzo's tutelage, your whole life was boiled down to orders. There was no freedom, there was no choice, there was no room for emotions. You did the job directly as told, no questions and no thinking for yourself. When that has been beaten in your head from a young age, suddenly thinking on your own wouldn't even register on your radar. All these children had were orders, it's all they knew. How old are you, Ori? 8. Nodding, Tenzo ran a hand through his hair. Well, Ori, were you being trained with someone? Just you two together? Yeah. Carrie. She's really nice. I think she's 10. She helped me memorize the call signs. Sometimes my memory isn't so good, Lord Danzo said something about when I was a baby something happened. But Carrie made them fun, and I can remember them, now. He smiled. Lord Danzo said I was almost ready to graduate, then he died. Relief washed through Tenzo. This little boy was spared from Danzo's version of a graduation exam. Pinning Ori against Carrie, whom he apparently loved very much, would cause this little boy to either die or block out all of his emotions. Either way, he would be destroyed. How do I tell the rest of you kids that it's okay, that you're safe now? Do you have a call sign to bring them all in and have them feel safe? Ori bit his lip, thinking hard. We're not supposed to talk to anyone not en route. But, if I tell them about you, they will talk to you. Tell them to meet us in the birdhouse. They will know where to go, and I can take you. Tenzo put a hand on Ori's head, ruffling the kid's hair. Thank you, Ori. Everything will be okay, now. I promise. Chapter 32, Not Everyone Lies. Gaara and Lee. The first thought that hit Naruto was how to tell Lee about Gaara without telling Lee about himself. He looked to Kakashi for help, blue eyes pleading for his sensei to have all the answers. Before either had time to form an idea, Guy had came to them with Lee in tow. What was left of the Konoha 12 huddled together, sensei included. Guy took a deep breath, gently squeezing his hand on the back of Lee's neck. He uses that sand like a weapon, as if it is an extension of himself. He uses it like a shield. Kakashi was carefully towing the line of telling what he shouldn't know in a way that was reasonable for him to know. Time jumping was exhausting. It's mixed with his chakra, so it's strong. Kurane bit her lip. There's more to him, isn't there? Hinata told me he talks to himself, as if he's talking to another person. She swears he kept saying mother. So he's insane. Ino rolled her eyes. Just fabulous. You need to be faster than his sand, Lee. Kakashi tried to help, tried to keep Lee from getting hurt this time. Might want to go in without your weights. When the huddle broke apart, they saw Gaara waiting in the battle area. Lee gently took his weights off his ankles, handing them to Guy. Hopping over the railing, Lee came face to face with a Jinhira key with a faulty seal. Naruto could feel Kurama pacing inside him, tails fanning out behind him, water sloshing around his huge paws. That boy has the wrong skill set to go up against Shukaku. Taijutsu won't be effective, here. Prepare yourself, brat. That strange boy may get injured. Naruto's eyes widened. No. Not Lee. He was fast. Faster than Sasuke, even. He would be fine. He had to be fine. Sasuke stood beside him, forearms on the railing. He will be okay. Sasuke nodded. As long as that Baijuyo stays inside, Lee should be okay. He glanced at Naruto. Why? What's Kurama saying? Lee has the wrong skill set. Taijutsu isn't effective. Sliding his arm across the railing, Sasuke bumped his hand against Naruto's. You believed in me. Now believe in Lee. With the sand already slowly spinning around him, Gaara stood with his arms crossed. Lee took his signature stance, ready to fight. When Hayate told them to start, Lee pushed off the ground, running toward Gaara. He wasn't using his full speed, not yet. The sand blocked him with every punch, every kick, matching him speed for speed. Lee stopped for a moment, bouncing from foot to foot. His current speed wasn't working. Then he would just increase it. When he ran toward Gaara this time, he was a blur. The sand was barely keeping up, barely able to block one attack before another came. Inside Gaara's head, Mother wanted blood. She was demanding it. Then, out of nowhere, Lee brought his heel down on Gaara's head, sending the boy into the floor. The sand formed where the hit began, uselessly protecting the air. Lee jumped back, taking up his stance, and waited. Gaara slowly pushed himself up, his arms shaking. Then something red landed on his hand. The liquid was warm, thick, making a trail as it went from his hand to the floor. Mother screamed. Everyone watched as the sand lifted Gaara up and stood him on his feet. His stance was different, his body language different. His skin was cracked, chipping away, as his second skin slowly dropped to the ground. A hand came up to wipe the blood away from his eyes. It left a long smear that cut through the tattoo on his forehead. Gaara took a long look at his hand, watching the blood shine in the light. The sand spread out on the floor, creating a thin layer over the ground. The whole area began to rumble, the ground shaking, as cracks started to form. From within the cracks, sand slowly filtered out, mixing with the sand Gaara already controlled. It filled the battle area, rising up like ocean waves. Lee ran as a tsunami of sand headed directly for him. Hands shot out of the rolling surface, trying to grab Lee as he jumped from spot to spot in an effort to escape. Gaara was in the center of the sand ocean, grabbing his head and screaming in pain. Mother was screaming out, screaming for blood, screaming to kill. Gaara was trying so hard to contain Mother, to calm her, but nothing was working. She pushed her way through, pushing to the front, taking over. He was lost in a dark room, begging, pleading, "Help me save me, help me save me." Everything was hurting. Mother's chakra burned. The sand slowly drained away until only a large fist remained. It chased Lee around the area, slamming down on the ground and leaving craters behind. Some of the sand seeped out of the cracks, puddling under Lee's feet. As his sandals made contact, it would slide, forcing him to lose balance. He hit his back, hard, seeing spots as his head hit the ground. The fist came slamming down, Lee barely rolled out of the way. Sand wrapped around his waist, squeezing hard, and slamming him against the wall. A deep growl left Gaara before he reached his hand out, attempting to squeeze it into a fist. It was stopped by Guy, who gripped Gaara's wrist so tight the boy left out a yelp. Kakashi and Hayate caught Lee as the sand slowly slipped away, dropping back into the ground or slipping inside the huge cord on Gaara's back. Mother had retreated, had pushed Gaara into the light, as foreign chakra slowly reached him. Hissing, Mother retreated further. Then silence. When Gaara opened his eyes, medics were rushing Lee off on a stretcher. For the first time in years, there was no constant talking in his mind. Mother's voice wasn't echoing in his head. "How?" With one hand over her heart, Fia breathed out a sigh of relief. Komei's chakra reached the boy before he could kill. It seemed to send the Baijuyu into hiding for the moment. "We are lucky that worked, Fia." Komei sounded relieved. "Little brother needs to learn." He never did listen. Then, curiously, Komei added, "Why didn't Kurama help? Is he really that far gone?" Looking across to the other balcony, Fia and Naruto's eyes met. "We can ask him." She gave the blonde a smile. "He looks friendly." "The boy does, not the Baijuyu inside." "Don't press your luck, dear." Hesitantly, Hayate took up his position in front of the statue. He coughed a couple of times before marking something on his clipboard. "Winner, Gaara." With the ensuing chaos caused by Gaara nearly losing control, Hiruzen stood behind the one-way glass with one hand held in the air. Doran Goat stood at the ready, prepared to control the situation if need be. Once Gaara took his spot back on the balcony, seemingly placated for the moment, Hiruzen dropped his hand. The Umbu relaxed a bit. The two bodyguards that arrived with Fia, Yoro, and Kigen, were standing in the back of the small room, watching the matches from above. They both stepped forward when Fia calmed the boy with Komei's chakra. "What is she doing?" Kigen looked across between worried and angry. "She knows to keep that chakra hidden." With the young girl begging to be in the Chunin exams for nearly 2 years, Fia was finally permitted to attend. There were multiple excuses the other nations used: "She's a Jinhyuriki, it's too dangerous, it wouldn't be fair to the other genin." When it finally came to Konoha hosting the exams, Hiruzen was sent a letter from the girl herself. She had a great counter-argument at the ready. She had heard Gaara was attending. With him allowing Naruto to attend, Hiruzen would have been a hypocrite to tell the girl she couldn't. However, it came with restrictions, as per Shivuki. 2 of them were standing in that small room, her Jounin bodyguards who were to protect her, and them from her if need be. She calmed down a potentially dangerous situation with no collateral damage. "Fia did good, Kigen." Hiruzen patted the man on the arm. "No harm done." Yoro glanced at Kigen. "Sir, what of the other Jinhyuriki? Should we keep the 3 separated?" "I fear you will not be able to. Fia is a headstrong young girl who has a bonded relationship with her Baijuyu. I am sure she already knows exactly who Naruto is and who resides inside him. Just as she did with Gaara." Taking a deep pull from his pipe, Hiruzen looked out over the battle area. "Lately, I've been wondering if the kids know more than us adults do." It took a long time for the chaos caused by Gaara and Lee to be fixed. Once the floor was smooth again, Hayate took a look up at the television screen. "Temari and Naruto." Kakashi put his hand on top of Naruto's head. "Don't pull too hard on your chakra, don't overuse it, and you will be fine. Take your time. Think before you act." Sharing a fist bump with Sasuke, Naruto steeled himself for a fight. Kurama was quiet, sitting still and keeping himself out of the way. It made Naruto feel better, feel like he had more control. With a bandage over his nose, Kankuro skirted around Gaara as he sat against the wall, making a show of helping Temari prepare. Even though she did not need any help, Kankuro shot Gaara worried looks but made no move to help the boy. Gaara was still grabbing his head, confused at the lack of talking inside. Something was hurting, something Gaara couldn't quite explain. Is it still hurting? Gaara slowly opened his eyes to see a green-haired girl with bright orange eyes. Here, let me. Something soothing and warm came over him. He felt Mother retreat further back into his mind. Did that help? He was so confused. Why was Mother quiet? What had happened? She was so loud, so angry, so ready to kill, then she retreated. Where did she go? What did you do? Gaara's green eyes were fluttering, exhaustion hitting him hard. How? It's okay. Fu sat down next to Gaara. Rest. I'll be right here. I will keep him quiet. Gaara wanted to argue, wanted to explain that the girl had it wrong. It wasn't a he, it was Mother. But his eyes were getting heavier and heavier. Watching as Gaara's head dropped, Fu pulled her knees up to her chest. The poor boy was tormented by his Baijuya. Kome's chakra was able to push him back, give the poor boy some peace, but it was only temporary. Someone bent down in front of Fu, casting a shadow over her. What did you do? She looked up to see the boy with the puppet standing over her. Is he okay? Narrowing her eyes, Fu glared up at Kankuro. You've been ignoring him since you came back, and you have the nerve to ask how he is? Who even are you? His brother. Kankuro hiked a thumb in Temari's direction. That is our sister. Gaara, he's been difficult to get close to. Honestly, we are terrified of him. But, that doesn't mean we don't care about him. She took a deep breath, judging the sincerity of Kankuro's words. I calmed him down. It made the Baijuya withdraw. As long as I'm sitting here, he will be fine. Fu looked out over the arena, seeing the third Jin hierarchy take his place. You're the same as Gaara, aren't you? Kankuro's voice was a little nasally due to a broken nose, but he looked sincere. He flopped on the floor, leaning back against the wall. Well, isn't that something? Temari took one look at the blonde kid in front of her and deemed him weak. The way he stood with barely contained restless energy, she could just tell he would be wiry and overconfident. The type of boys she hated. He was full of weaknesses. Temari had better things to do. She and her brothers had a plan. They had a very specific mission. All that was required of them in the exams is to get to the finals. No one would stand in her way. Especially not some overconfident kid. That is a huge fan. Temari rolled her eyes when the kid pointed toward her ninja weapon. What's it do? She gave him a devilish smirk. When the match starts, you will wish you never asked. When the proctor started the match, Temari watched the blonde kid drop into a fighting stance, his blue eyes watching her warily. She sat her large fan beside her, hand gripping the metal edge. The blonde kid shifted from foot to foot, preparing himself. With a flick of her finger, the fan opened to the first metal rib. The fabric inside showed one purple circle. So, what does it do? Show was better than tell. Temari used both hands to grip the metal edge, swinging the fan in front of her. A gust of wind blew toward him, sending the boy sliding backward with the force. When he righted himself, his blue eyes were wide. Whoa! That is really cool. I can do wind-style stuff, too. Before Temari could reply, Naruto sped through hand signs, sending a vortex of air careening toward her. It was easily dodged, but Naruto used that time to summon several shadow clones. They fanned around him in an arc. They each pulled out a scroll before leaping into the air. Kunao and Shuriken came raining down on Temari. With a swing of her fan, the weapons were caught in a wall of wind, held there with chakra. Some of the weapons popped, being cloned upon exiting the scroll. Temari heard a girl from the balcony yell down, praising Naruto's use of weapon scroll. She watched the blonde smile back at the girl. Taking her chance, Temari sent the weapons flying back at the blonde. She watched as his blue eyes shifted from the balcony back to her. He wasn't going to move in time. Temari was going to win. She didn't have time to celebrate, however. A puff of smoke appeared before an elbow connected with her wrist. The fan was knocked from her grasp long enough for Naruto to get his hands on it. Flipping backward, he held the weapon in front of him, trying to quickly figure out how it works. No. Temari held out her hands, trying to make him stop. You don't know how to use it. You'll ruin it. There was a fox-like grin on his face as Naruto let his chakra slide into the metal. He pulled it back, watching as the girl's eyes widened. It couldn't be that hard, could it? Just some chakra, then swing it. He could do this. Technically, Naruto was right. He did do it. He just did it a little too much. It only took a flicker of red chakra slipping out for the jutsu to go a little wrong. Instead of just a gust of wind, Naruto sent a razor-sharp wind vortex at Temari. The small tornado of air curved its trajectory, allowing Temari to dodge it easily. The vortex slowly ran itself out while Temari glared at Naruto. In his hands, the fabric of the fan was shredded. There were scraps laying at his feet. Some of the metal spines were bent or broken. Naruto looked from the fan to Temari's face before sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. Oh, sorry. I might have put a little too much in there. Temari was livid. You're sorry? You put a little too much in. She threw her hands up in the air. My fan is broken, you moron. It takes weeks to order in that special fabric. What kind of genin doesn't know how to control their chakra? What kind of freak are you? The sheepish look on Naruto's face was instantly wiped away. His whole life, he'd been called every iteration of freak or monster. Now he had a family and precious people. Now he knew the truth. He wouldn't tolerate the names any longer. With a speed Temari hadn't seen before, Naruto sent two clones running. They each grabbed an arm, holding her still. Temari didn't even have time to react. The original Naruto pulled a kunai out of his pouch and sent it flying directly toward Temari's forehead. He watched her eyes widen as she struggled against the clones. It came closer and closer. Temari squeezed her eyes shut, but nothing happened. When she opened her eyes, a pale fist was gripping the kunai still in the air. The original Naruto stood in front of her as the clone held onto the kunai. Don't ever call me that again. I didn't mean to break your fan. I apologized. Do not call me a freak. Red flashed in his blue eyes. You're like Gaara. Her voice was barely a whisper. Looking toward Hayate, she yelled out, I give up. The clones popped, the kunai falling to the ground, as Hayate made his way over. Are you sure? Why yeah. I give up. Shrugging, Hayate marked it down on his clipboard. Winner, Naruto. As Ori had explained, the birdhouse was an old tower that sat outside of the walls. It used to be used as a secondary aviary, but was discontinued when Yondaime came into power. After that it became nothing more than an empty building. At least, as far as Tenzo knew. Once inside, Ori pressed his palm against a section of wall that gave way to a staircase. It spiraled down deep underground, the air around them getting colder the farther they went. As they stepped down, Ori slowly lit up the area with a glowing orb in his hand. Whatever Tenzo was expecting, it wasn't waiting for him down there. A room full of children, all dressed in Umbu uniforms that were too big for them, the breastplates hanging down to their knees. Masks of Umbu long since retired sat on their faces, freshly painted with careful lines and bright colors. The room was lit by artificial lights hanging from the ceiling, casting shadows that danced off the walls. Several of the kids gave a start when Tenzo entered the room. Barely concealed panic ran through the crowd of kids. Wait, Ori called out, hands out in front of him in an attempt to calm the room. This is Tenzo. Lord Danzo trained him, too. He knows the call signs. Tenzo stayed behind Ori in an attempt to make the kids feel at ease. There were so many of them, all scared and confused. He kept his mask off, as did Ori. I'm here to help you. All of you. He had a moment of wondering what Kakashi-senpai would do. But he trusted this to Tenzo, and Tenzo would not fail Kakashi. You will all be safe, now. We had a plan. If anything ever happened to Lord Danzo. Another brightly colored mask was removed as a young girl stepped forward. He said the root agents would take care of us, would give us orders, but they just left us. We didn't know what to do. Leaning down in front of the girl, he tried to give her a smile. What's your name? Carrie. This was the girl Ori had told Tenzo about. Ori and I trained together. We were ready to graduate. Her long, dark blue hair hung over her purple eyes. Another child stepped forward before removing his mask. Where are the root agents? In hiding. Tenzo looked at the boy who stepped forward, seeing the scars crisscrossing over his face. They had other orders. A rumble went through the group. Why would Lord Danzo leave us without orders? Carrie put a hand over her mouth. She turned to the boy beside her. Shiro? What do we do now? Shiro didn't know how to answer. He looked as scared as the others did. Tenzo placed a hand on Kari's shoulder. Carrie, it's okay. I will give you orders. I'm your elder agent, correct? You have to listen to me. The young girl nodded, her hair bouncing around her. All of you, take your masks off. There was a murmur in the crowd as they all showed their faces. They were so young. One by one, I am going to write down your name and age. Once I finish with this, I will give you other orders. Until I am done, just wait patiently, okay? The kids all stood at attention before forming a single file line. Pulling a small notebook from his pouch, Tenzo popped the pencil from the binder and called the first child to him. Sakura and Tenten. Although they had sparred together before, they had never gone all out. Abstractly, they knew what the other could do. The Konoha balcony cheered as the two took their places across for each other. Taking her stance, Tenten had a smile on her face. Bring it on, Sakura. I'm ready for you. You don't know half of what I can do, Tenten. Sakura unsnapped her sword, swinging it around her. But, you will find out. Tenten laughed. So cocky. I'll knock that out of you. Go Sakura. Kick her ass, girl. Ino yelled from the balcony, jumping up and down. You've got this. With her eyes glued to the Kyubikurei Basho, Hiraki leaned over the balcony. That couldn't be. How did some random Konoha genin have the Kyubikurei Basho? She turned around, looking at her sensei. Who looked equally shocked. How does she have that? Surely Zabuza didn't, not to her. It belongs in Kiri. Take it back. Takakeo gave Hiraki a dark look. It wasn't a request, it was an order. When Hate called for the match to start, Tenten jumped into action. She ran in an arc around Sakura, pulling a scroll from her pouch. Unrolling it, Tenten fed her chakra into the seals as she jumped in the air. Kunao and shuriken came flying at Sakura, who hid behind the large sword. When the assault of weapons eased up, Sakura kicked the ground, sending a wave of earth toward Tenten. Back-flipping out of the way, Tenten planted her feet on the wall and stood perpendicular to the ground. Tilting her head up, she smiled sweetly at Sakura. Then Sakura heard the sound of a scroll unrolling behind her. She barely had the time to put up a rock wall before more weapons came flying at her. Hiding behind the rock wall with her sword held over her head, Sakura managed to negate most of the weapons. Damn Naruto and teaching Tenten how to make shadow clones. She spent a large portion of their fight hiding from Tenten's rain of weapons. Thousands of them came flying at her, breaking through the rock wall and making a clanging sound as they bounced off the sword. Finally, when Tenten took a break from the scrolls, Sakura ran toward her, sword held over her head. With wide eyes, Tenten frantically pulled a scroll from her pouch, summoning a battle axe. The two weapons clashed, sparks flying. Now it was down to strength, and Sakura had Tenten beaten that. She pushed hard, causing Tenten to slide across the ground. Damn it, Sakura. Tenten growled out. She had specifically bought the battle axe in case she had to cross swords with the Kyubikurei Basho. It was the strongest metal she could afford. With a tap of her heel against the ground, Sakura put a small bump of earth behind Tenten's sandal. The next time she slid backward, the bump caught her sandal. Tenten lost her footing, staggering backward. She let up her grip just long enough for Sakura to send the battle axe clattering to the ground. Tenten dodged to the side, barely missing the sword that slammed into the ground next to her. Using the time it took for Sakura to lift the hunk of metal, Tenten pulled 2 small scrolls from her pouch. Her own special jutsu, one she had created, was ready to use in battle since Naruto had helped her tweak it. Before Sakura could readjust her grip, Tenten flew through the hand signs, causing the 2 scrolls to rise up in the air, unraveling as they go. Jumping up between them, Tenten quickly threw the weapons that were popped out of the 2 scrolls. They rained down on Sakura, causing her to hide again. Weak paper bombs were attached to some of the kunao, igniting as they made contact with the Kyubikurei Basho. When the jutsu was over, and Tenten returned to the ground, she watched as the deeply pockmarked, dented and burned sword was sat back on the ground. Taking a look at the sword, Tenten had a moment of fear that she'd actually ruined the sword with her twin rising dragons. Then Sakura used the sharp edge to slice into her palm, running the blood over the metal. With a sizzling sound, the sword absorbed the blood and healed the damage. She heals, Tenten. Thought you knew that. You're starting to piss me off, Sakura, Tenten said with a smirk. She pulled out 2 Fuma Shuriken. With one in each hand, she threw them both at Sakura. With the sword held in front of her, Sakura watched as they missed, going wildly to each side of her. Tenten never missed. What was she planning? Then the glint of ninja wire could be seen in the light. The large shuriken embedded themselves in the wall behind Sakura, the ninja wire catching her around the middle and pulling her flat against the wall. Tenten had her. She'd taken the Kyubikurei Basho out of play. Running toward Sakura, she dipped down to grab the battle axe. She pulled the axe over her head, gripping it tightly. Sakura couldn't move the sword. It was trapped beside her. Tenten had this in the bag. The ninja wire snapped as Sakura slowly twisted the sword, causing the sharp edge to dig into the wire. Before the axe could make contact, Sakura grabbed the hilt of the sword and roundhouse kicked Tenten in the stomach. The battle axe went flying, again, as did Tenten. She landed with a thump on the ground, the breath knocked out of her. Sakura slowly walked over to her, getting ready to fight in case Tenten jumped back up. Instead, she stayed down. I give up, Tenten slowly pushed herself up. You are strong. Hey jogged over, leaning down beside the girl. Did I hear you right? Tenten just nodded her head, one hand held to her chest as she attempted to catch her breath. Sakura held out her hand, pulling Tenten off the ground. She leaned against Sakura's shoulder, smiling through heavy breaths. That was awesome. Tenten nodded, breathing out a laugh. Hey looked a little too proud when he announced, winner, Sakura. Hiraki and Ino. Finally, the last preliminary match was called. The television flicked off behind Hayate as the Jounin leaned back against the statue behind him. There was restless energy from the crowd, an endorphin fix from watching the harrowing matches. Covered in nicks and scratches from Tenten's many weapons, Sakura wrapped her arms around Ino. Good luck. I know you'll do amazing. Her smile was all teeth and squinted eyes. Ino couldn't help but brush a piece of hair behind Sakura's ear. Asuma put a hand on top of her head. Do your best, Ino. As Ino took her position on the battle area, Hiraki was still angry from the previous match. She turned to her sensei, who gave her a sharp nod. Permission to go all out. Permission to harm. As she took up her side of the area, Hiraki looked up at the balcony, her eyes trained on Sakura. The Kyubikurei Basho was hanging on her back, where it didn't belong. That girl with the pink hair, who only used the sword to block with, who let it get damaged, has the nerve to stand there, calling out to this blonde. Taking the spot beside Sakura, Tenten looked down at the competitor. Another chance to see this trident. I swear I saw lightning last time she fought. But, Ino's got this. She's sparred with me enough. Sakura watched as Ino's light eyes settled on her. All the feelings Sakura had been keeping buried inside of her didn't seem so devastating to admit. Love makes you strong. Ino's mouth dropped open but Tenten just smirked. She'd seen that coming. Hiraki saw the interaction, heard the words, and filed it away. That pink-haired girl was too soft to hold a sword that important. Where was Zabuza and why did this weak girl have his sword? One final look back toward her own sensei, seeing the resolve in his eyes, and Hiraki knew what she had to do. When the proctor started the match, she pulled the trident free and pointed it directly at Sakura. This destruction would be on her head. She caused this by taking one of the 7 ninja swordsman's swords and claiming it as her own. A wall of thick fog covered the room, so dense it stuck to their skin and clothes. Kunao and shuriken went flying through the fog, bouncing off the floor and walls, slicing Ino's skin as the girl tried to defend herself against attacks she couldn't see. Kakashi activated his Sharingan, aiming at the Kiri Jounin sensei. But it wasn't that man causing the mist, it was all Hiraki. Pulling the trident in front of her, Hiraki let lightning flicker to life, skipping across the surface and down each sharp tine. She ran around the girl, shocking her from every angle. Ino was crying out, not able to do anything to defend herself. With one kunao in each hand, Ino tried, desperately, to get a hit off. The girl was too fast in the fog, too able to disappear in plain sight. Sakura had her hands gripped on the railing, her knuckles turning white. What was going on? She couldn't see, she could only hear Ino's cries. A final noise from Ino, a scream of pain, then, all at once, the fog disappeared. Blood was laying everywhere, pooling at Ino's feet. The trident was stabbed into her stomach, still arcing with lightning. Ino! Sakura screamed, jumping over the banister. Hate frantically called the match, gripping Hiraki's arm and wrenching it off the weapon. Sakura's hands were hovering above Ino, not sure where to start, paralyzed. All of her training, all of her experience, flew out of her head. She panicked, tears streaming down her face. Medics came rushing in, stretcher held between them, all holding green glowing hands over Ino's middle. From somewhere, Inoichi ran onto the area, hovering over the scene. Strong hands grabbed Sakura by the biceps, pulling her to her feet. Let them work, sweetheart, Inoichi said into her ear, trying to remain calm. He held on to Sakura while the medics worked the trident out of her stomach as they tried to heal the bleeding it caused simultaneously. Ino was deathly pale, bordering on gray, as they slowly lifted her onto the stretcher. Several medics stayed next to her, hands still glowing, still healing her as they ran toward the secret tunnel. All that was left was Ino's dark blood on the floor. Too calmly, Hiraki picked up the trident and walked back up the steps. She took her place next to her Jounin sensei, standing tall in pride. Sakura broke down as Inoichi handed her off to Kakashi. He'd promised to let Kakashi know what happens before running after the medics. Leaning down, Kakashi picked Sakura up, her head buried into his shoulder, sobbing. Hei didn't even bother calling out who won. He waited for Sandaime to come down from his room. It was so hard for him to watch Sakura breaking down in Kakashi's arms and not be able to run to her. Someone came rushing out from the back, a bucket and a mop in hand. Their job was to clean up the blood. Hei felt sick. Taking another sip of sake, Jiraiya watched the man by the bar. He'd been following this man for days. Jiraiya could pick his dark cloak and shaggy black hair from a million others. There were rumors about Orochimaru, here. Rumors that the man had a secret lair hidden underground. This cloaked man was his runner, the one who does Orochimaru's errands. Eventually, Jiraiya hoped, the man had to lead him to something, some clue to where his elusive ex-teammate was. The front door to the building opened, but Jiraiya paid it no mind. He kept his eyes trained, stealthily, on the cloaked man. And then a pair of large breasts dropped into his view. With the small cup of sake frozen halfway to his mouth, Jiraiya's eyes went from the amazing view up to the familiar face attached. Well, well, well. He set the cup down and leaned back in his chair. Aren't you a sight for sore eyes? His eyes flicked back down to her chest before returning to her honey eyes. Did you miss me, darling? This, Jiraiya, is why you're single. Tsunade flopped down in the chair across from him. With Tuntun held tightly in her arms, Shizun took a seat next to her. I've been searching for you. We need to talk. Smiling, Jiraiya crossed his arms. Before you ask, yes, I will sleep with you. His head snapped to the side as Tsunade slapped him. He'd forgotten how hard she can hit. Fuck, sorry. I'll be serious. Not here. Tsunade looked tired. She looked like she'd been traveling for days without rest. So did her apprentice, Shizuan. We need to find somewhere more private. I trust you can still make a privacy seal. He'd been following a man who could lead him to his ex-teammate for days. But this was Tsunade. I have a room. I've been here for a couple of days. It's already sealed. Throwing some ryo on the table, he motioned for the women to follow. The women at the front desk gave Jiraiya a look as he led two women up the stairs. If only she knew how wrong her idea was. When he let them in the room, Tsunade immediately took a seat on the bed, kicking her sandals off. She waited as Jiraiya activated the privacy seals. Can I trust you to keep an open mind, here? And not ask questions until I'm done. Jiraiya made a motion as if he was zipping his lips shut. We recently met a couple of members of Akatsuki. One of them being Uchiha Itachi. The kid is sick. Really sick. I healed him. Jiraiya gave a start but didn't make a noise, which Tsunade appreciated. Hashikage Kisame is his partner. He cared enough about his partner to get him somewhere safe. Not how I thought the Akatsuki would work. She glanced at Shizuan, who nodded in agreement. Every question I had for Itachi, the kid answered. This is going to sound crazy, but I don't think he wants to be there. There is more to what happened than we know. A lot more. Kisame isn't a mindlessly evil character he's made out to be, Shizuan added. He was actually worried about Itachi. Opening his mouth, Jiraiya had begun to ask a question, but he snapped it shut again. He'd promised not to talk. He'd hold his question until the end. Itachi just talked. He didn't lie to me, didn't give me any half-truths. He even admitted that there was someone watching them when they were away from the base. Jiraiya, he was scared to die. He was actually scared. I let him go. I let Itachi and Kisame continue on their way. We were going to Konoha, but Tsunade glanced at Shizuan before taking a deep breath. I can't go back there and not help at the hospital. Jiraiya, I'm asking you to help me get over the fear of blood. I tried on my own. I'm not strong enough. Then, with a wave of her hand, she added, now you may ask your questions. Opening and closing his mouth, Jiraiya tried to pick which question he wanted to ask first. You had a member of the Akatsuki in front of you, sick, and you healed him. Then you sat down and had a chat with him and his partner. What do you mean Itachi doesn't want to be there? This was his idea. No leaning back on one arm, Tsunade shook her head. I think the kid was ordered to join. There was a long pause as Jiraiya took that all in. He would call it all a lie, call it some grand joke, but this was Tsunade. She doesn't make jokes like this. Especially not about something so private to her, so important to her, as her ability to heal. Okay. Where do you want to start? That's it. She laughed. No telling me I'm completely insane. No telling me that I've lost my knack for reading people, for telling if they're lying, for dash. Tsunade. Jiraiya interrupted her. I know you. This is something you fully believe, and I fully believe you. Now, where do you want to start? The relief that washed through her was palpable. She gave her ex-teammate a soft smile. Thank you, Jiraiya. Something had been eating at Kisame for weeks. As he looked over at his partner, seeing Itachi looking healthier than he'd ever seen the kid, it made Kisame question things. He'd believed for so long that everyone lies. Something had jaded him long ago, and Kisame held it in front of him like a shield. The appeal of a perfect world where no one lied appealed to him too much to ignore. He would help usher in the new world order with Same Hatter right beside him. Pain had put him with a partner, much to Kisame's disdain. He'd taken one look at the teenager, too young and too thin, and deemed him weak. Then he'd learned better. Itachi had proven to Kisame that there were people who did not lie. There were people who could be trusted. If he was so wrong about the teenager, what else was he wrong about? Then he'd met Senju Tsunade. A woman who, by all rights, should have tried to kill them both. Instead, she took one look at a very sick Itachi and chose to heal him. Kisame expected a group of Konoha to be waiting outside, even though she promised there wouldn't be any. People lie. Kisame expected Konoha to track them down, to attack at every corner they made, every thick patch of woods, but nothing happened. They had made it back to base, safely, with no attacks, and Itaka completely fine. Senju Tsunade didn't lie. She didn't send a group of tracking ninja after them. She didn't lie. If he'd been so wrong about her, he'd been so wrong about Itaka, it stands to reason he'd been wrong about other things, too. When they had gotten back to the base, Pain was waiting for them, calling a meeting as soon as they'd entered the cave. A huge opening in the cave was carved into a rounded ceiling with a large chandelier hanging from the center. With a flick of his hand, Pain caused the candles to light, making the chandelier cast light that bounced off the rocks. Every member was there, all standing around, waiting. Standing tall on a raised platform in front of them, Pain looked around at his members. Kisame hated the way Pain looked at people. It was like the man was looking through them with those damn purple eyes. The time has come for us to begin collecting the Jin hierarchy in earnest. There is no room for error. The woman beside him, Konan, always had a submissive personality. Today, however, she stood taller. It made Kisame nervous. Currently, there are 3 of them in Konoha. They are mere children, so surely they won't be difficult to capture. It's my understanding that Konoha Chiryunin exams have a month-long preparation. They have a month to train between the preliminaries and the finals, Itaki answered. From its position on Kisame's back, Samehada gave a shudder. Flicking his eyes around the room, Kisame looked for Zetsu. It was usually that chakra that made Samehada react like that. But Zetsu wasn't around. Who was the sword sensing? Pain continued his speech, reminding them all why capturing the Baijuya was of utmost importance, but Kisame couldn't focus with Samehada acting up. With his eyes focused on anything suspicious around him, Kisame noticed the way Konan's eyes kept flickering behind Pain, toward the door. She left the raised ledge, disappearing behind the door. Again, Samehada gave a shudder. What was behind that door? It was much later, when night fell and people were slowly making their way to their rooms, that Kisame caught Itaka by the arm. How are you feeling? He thought he saw a slight smirk on Itaka's face. I am feeling a lot better. She is a very talented healer. Something must have been on Kisame's face, some emotion that Itaka picked up on. Do you want to come in and plan our trip to Konoha? It was a loaded question, could be taken a multitude of ways by anyone overhearing them, but that was better than the alternative. Yeah. Kisame took a leap of faith and entered Itaka's sleeping quarters. When Hiruzen entered the battle area, he was met by his son. Asuma was furious, his hands moving while talking, demanding his father do something about the Kiri ninja. Shikaka rushed out behind Hiruzen, heading straight for his son. Shikamaru looked broken, his eyes shining with unspent tears. Doing something Hiruzen had never seen the boy do, Shikamaru flung himself at his father. Dad, are you listening to me? Hiruzen placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Of course, son. But my hands are tied. Only if the child perishes can I disqualify them. The Chiryunin exams are dangerous. We have actual waivers to get into the forest. Dad. Asuma, I understand. That is your student. I am telling you that, as Hokage, my hands are tied without starting an international incident. I don't like it, either. I am sorry, son, but the most I can do is give them a talk. Hiruzen glanced over at Shikamaru, who was still clinging to his father. Trust me, I want to do a lot more. Chairs were pulled in, giving the kids a seat while they waited. Hiruzen saw Naruto, curled in a ball with his knees to his chest, one hand gripping Kakashi's flak jacket and the other twisted in Sasuke's shirt. A medic walked away, showing one of Sasuke's hands bandaged in bright white gauze. Kakashi was still holding on to Sakura, the girl still sniffling against his chest. The Jounin just stared ahead, unseeing. Hiruzen walked over to them, his robe dragging on the floor behind him. Once he got close, Naruto's blue eyes peered over his knees. Here to say, I told you so. Naruto's voice was full of distrust, something that Hiruzen had planted in him. There was steel in Sasuke's eyes as he took in his Hokage. He'd lost all respect from these kids, and Hiruzen couldn't blame them in the least. Looking over at Kakashi, Hiruzen realized how easy it was to misread the Jounin. Underneath his aloof attitude and well-practiced disinterest sat a brittle man who had been through so much in a short period of time. It made sense why the man clung so tight to these children, why he fought so hard for what was best for them. Then there was Sakura, who was destroyed in more ways than just one. Of course not, Naruto. I came to let you know Ino's status. Sakura's eyes flew open. She sat up, looking right at him. The bleeding in her abdomen has been stopped. Unfortunately, she is still unconscious. But she is alive. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough for right now. Sakura nodded, leaning back against Kakashi. You kids all did great in your matches. Your Jounin-sensei has trained some very skillful genin. It did little. The kids looked like they couldn't care less what Hiruzen thought. It was well warranted. Once the medics were done tending to everyone, and the room calmed down, Hayate called for the genin to line up. What was left of the Konoha genin all stood together in a line. The television flickered to life, showing a tournament bracket. On this screen are the matchups for the semi-finals. You have a month from tomorrow to train and prepare. Use your time wisely. On the screen, in black and white, was how the kids were divided up. Match 1, Fuya vs. Neji. Match 2, Sasuke vs. Shikamaru. Match 3, Gaara vs. Naruto. Match 4, Sakura vs. Hiraki. Chapter 33, Motivation. I absolutely hate being lied to. Kisame took a seat at the small desk in Itaka's sleeping quarters. The man looked so confused, so lost. You know more than we do, don't you? You always see things others can't. Sitting down on the edge of his bed, Itaka took in his blue teammate. Contrary to popular opinion, Kisame wasn't a stupid one-track-minded killing machine. Being a strong, talented ninja, although helping immensely, wasn't the only thing that kept him alive all this time. He had a knack for battle strategy and reading a situation. Itaka had to admit that Kisame was reading this one perfectly. I have no solid proof, Kisame, other than what I've noticed. As I said, Itaka, your eyes see more than others do. Kisame waved him on. I will take everything you say with a grain of salt. Well, it was a start. One last check, just making sure Zetsu was nowhere around, before he started. Pain is not the one in charge of the organization. I believe he is a mere puppet to whoever actually is giving orders. That, Itaka knew for sure. Obito was the one in charge. There are things we are not being told. I don't believe the perfect world is what we are being told it is. With a pensive look, Kisame stared at the floor. Itaka waited, knowing what he'd shared so far was weighing heavy on the man's mind. What is behind that door? Where Pain and Konan go after they talk to us? Perhaps the person who is really giving the orders. Debating how much more information he could share, what more Kisame could be shown the truth of, Itaka weighed the idea of admitting his trip to Konoha. Would that be too much too soon? Kisame caught Itaka's eyes. Why did you do it? You had to have a reason to kill your entire clan. Itaka took a deep breath. It would do him no good to lie. He'd earned Kisame's trust, Itaka did not want to lose it, now. I had to choose between my clan and my village. In the end, I chose my brother. It was the only way to guarantee his safety. Huh. So that's where you went? When you took your trip? Itaka nodded. On orders, I killed the Cypher division I was guarding when we were attacked by Konoha. Then the bastard that gave me the orders was selling village secrets the entire time. I killed him, took Samehada, and realized that the world is full of liars. After a pause, Kisame gave a smirk. Although, that realization has been challenged recently. Tsunade. Kisame huffed out a laugh. Yeah. She could have killed us. Could have had Umbu attempt to capture us. Instead, she let us go. Why? I honestly don't know. Jiraiya led the two women to a small clearing not too far from the village. He'd used it the previous week while waiting for his mark. The remnant of the small campfire he'd made was still visible. Pulling out a storage scroll, Shizune began setting up the tents she'd pulled out. With Tuntun in tow, Tsunade went for a walk around the surrounding woods, a small attempt to clear her mind. While she was gone, out of earshot, Jiraiya sidled up to Shizune. So, of all the people she would come to for help, why did she choose me? Turning to look at Jiraiya, Shizun looked sad. I really feel like I don't know the whole story, here, Shizun. The young woman glanced around, trying to find Tsunade through the trees. She must have judged the woman far enough away. About 2 days after our meeting with Itachi and Kisame, I woke up to her crying. She was sitting next to a bush with a kunao in her hand. Over and over again, she would cut her palm open, throw up, heal her palm, and do it all over again. She called it exposure therapy, but it looked like torture. Shizun took a deep breath, close to tears herself. My uncle would not have wanted her to live this way. Especially not because of him. I am not helping her torture herself, Shizun. I care about her far too much to do that. Shizun gave him a small smile. I know. You always have. Then she got a serious look on her face. Cognitive therapy would work a lot better. Or a genjutsu. Something that is not harming herself. Jiraiya nodded, thinking hard about his options. Medical ninjutsu was never his specialty. He could heal small issues, keep himself alive, but that was about it. He had absolutely zero experience in mental health, which Jiraiya was assuming a blood phobia would be considered. But Jiraiya would do anything for Tsunade. He always would. Okay. Clapping his hands together, Jiraiya tried to put on a false bravado. Shizun wasn't buying it. Let's get her all fixed up, then. Really think it will be that easy, Jiraiya? Tsunade's voice sounded behind him. When he turned around, she had one hand on her hip as Tuntun sat by her foot. I cut, you heal. Keep it going until dash. Jiraiya shook his head. Absolutely not. I'm not going to sit here and watch you, no. Just sit down and let's talk this out, first. What do you have to lose? Before Tsunade could argue, and Jiraiya knew she would, he turned to Shizun. Here. Take my wallet. Go rent you and Tuntun a room for the night. Let me handle this. The young woman looked like she wanted to argue, but Jiraiya urged her on. Everything will be okay, Shizun. I promise. Surprised at the lack of fight Tsunade put up, Jiraiya waited until Shizun was far away before turning around. Tsunade looked like she had just gone through a war with how exhausted she was. It did little to take away from the fire in her eyes. This wasn't some excuse for you to get me alone, Jiraiya. We are about to dig up shit you don't want to think about. This whole exposure therapy bullshit isn't going to work. We need to deal with the underlying cause. So. Let's talk about Dan. Instantly, Tsunade bristled. You wanted my help. This is it. She tried to walk past Jiraiya, but he caught her arm. There was a sharp hiss before something lit up on her bicep. Did you fucking seal me? Tsunade's honey eyes were like fire as she glared at Jiraiya. Let me go. With his hands on her arms, Jiraiya led her to a log, sitting her down. Comfortable. She continued to glare. Not dealing with Dan got you into this mess. That seal will stop your movement, but not your mouth, unfortunately. You are aware that, as a medic, there will be people you cannot save. I'm sorry it was the man you loved, but dash. Fuck you, Jiraiya. What do you know about love? Sitting here acting high and mighty like you didn't run from your problems. How is your godson? They knew how to hit each other below the belt. They knew exactly what to say to get a reaction. Spending most of their lives together gave them the opportunity to really know each other. Instead of rising to the bait, Jiraiya took a deep breath. We can focus on my fuck-ups later. Right now, let's talk about you. Before Tsunade could open her mouth again, Jiraiya pushed forward. Dan would not have wanted you to live like this. The angry look on her face gave way to sadness. You didn't kill him. He was already gone by the time we got there, you know that. It would have taken a miracle for you to bring him back from that. More tears began to fall. I haven't always been the greatest friend, to you or anyone, but I do care. I know what happened broke you, but you are strong enough to bring yourself back. You have to realize that Dan dying was not your fault. With tears streaming down her face, Tsunade began to sob. You always said I could heal anyone. Why couldn't I heal him? Taking a seat next to her, Jiraiya put his arm around her shoulders. Tsunade, he was already gone. Don't torture yourself for something you had no control over. He pulled the woman closer against him. You can't save everyone. You can do some damn amazing things, but you're not a god. I miss him. He hadn't heard Tsunade's sound that broken in years. I miss my brother. The seal on her arm slowly faded away. I just want to be me again. She buried her face into Jiraiya's shoulder. Exposure therapy would have been easier. Jiraiya snorted. Not nearly as effective, sadly. She picked up her head, looking him in the eye. You don't have to say it. I know I'm right. I usually am, honestly. For the first time in a long time, Jiraiya heard Tsunade actually laugh. Inside room 332, Ino was hooked up to various monitors and fours decorating her arms. She was pale, her long hair loose, fanned out on the stark white pillow. She was working on her third day unconscious. The medics kept saying she would wake up, her wounds were healing well, any day now. It didn't matter how long it took, Sakura would be the first thing Ino saw. The door opened behind her, the loud sounds of the hospital breaking the silence of the room. Familiar footsteps came to a stop beside her. Sakura. Inoichi placed a hand on her shoulder. Sweetheart, you need to go home. Shower, change, eat. It will do no one any good if you end up in a room down the hall. No, her pink hair flew from side to side as Sakura shook her head. I did it. I caused this. Dropping to one knee, Inoichi pulled the young girl in for a hug. No, you did not. The girl who hurt Ino was not you. There was no possible way for anyone to predict that would have happened. And, before you say it, no. Having that sword did not cause this. He pulled back, looking into her bright green eyes. Would Ino want you to sit here? Would Ino want you to feel like shit? No. She would want you to fight. That girl who hurt our Ino is your opponent. You have a month to prepare, and then I fully expect you to show her exactly why she shouldn't fuck with Konoha. Sakura's mouth dropped open. She'd never heard Inoichi swear before. And show her why that sword belongs with you and no one else. One more look at Ino and Sakura stood up. Inoichi was right. Sitting there, feeling sorry for herself, wasn't going to do anyone any good. Revenge. Sakura wanted revenge. Looking back at her pseudo-father, Sakura wrapped her arms around him. Thank you. I'll go find sensei. I need trained. As she jogged out the door, her hair bobbing around her head, Inoichi smiled. Placing a hand on top of Ino's, squeezing it gently, the man had a realization. I didn't see it before, but I think I do, now. He sighed. Maybe I should stop letting you two share a bed. The walls were covered in parchment, scribbled notes, and ideas in dark black ink. Piles of sealing scrolls and bottles of sealing ink teetered on top of unpacked boxes in the corner. His father's book opened on his bed, careful notes wrote tightly in the margins, along with every other written text he owned about Fuinjutsu. As soon as he learned how to read his own seal, Naruto could work on Gaara's. But, before all of that, Naruto had to figure out how to remove Sasuke's. Dropping the pen on the desk, Naruto scrubbed his hands through his hair. If he could use clones, he could make this process go faster. But the two he tried to summon ended up in a heap at his feet before popping out of existence. At least they didn't scream in pain this time. Kid. It was the first time Kurama had talked all day. He'd been quiet while Naruto turned his bedroom into a Fuinjutsu research mecca. One thing I've learned from being stuck in you do your best work while punching something. You've read all these several times. Go outside. I can't. It needs removed, Kurama. I can't just, Naruto sighed. It's hurting him. And you will be no damn good to him if you stress yourself out. Your kindred can handle the pain. He fought with it, remember? The puny human mind is too prone to stress. It's a weakness that us Byakuya were not cursed with, thankfully. This, puny human mind, is about ready to work a muzzle into the seal. Slamming his hands on the desk, Naruto pushed himself up. Fine. I'll go punch something. The boy was still mumbling to himself, ignoring anything else Kurama said, and pulled the front door open. He'd almost ran into the girl standing on his porch, hand up, about to knock. Oh. She jumped, her orange eyes wide. Well, at least I know I have the right place. Inside him, Kurama let out a low growl. Naruto blinked. You're the girl from the exams. The one who is like me. Instinctively, Naruto put a hand over his seal. Yup. The girl was far too cheerful to admit she is a Jinchuriki. We should talk. I never met another Jinchuriki before I came here. I was never allowed out of the village, to be honest. With Kakashi and Sasuke getting supplies and groceries, Naruto was left home alone. Would Kakashi be angry if Naruto allowed the girl inside? He didn't want to upset his sensei, but she was just like him. And she didn't seem to be crazy like Gaara. Taking a chance, Naruto waved her inside. What's your name? Phew. She held out her hand. Naruto took it. He wasn't used to shaking hands, but he didn't actually have to react. Phew did the work for him as she eagerly shook it. I'm Naruto. Oh, this is so exciting. Phew bounced on the balls of her feet. You could sense me, right? At the preliminaries? Koumei sensed you, well, not you, but his brother. She motioned vaguely toward Naruto's stomach. I didn't know there would be other Jinchuriki, besides Gaara, taking part. He was the only reason I was allowed to come. The water sloshed around Kurama's tails as he twitched them, annoyed at the presence of his sibling. Naruto, however, was happy to have someone to share his unique situation with. Kurama is being grumpy, but I'm happy to meet you. He smiled at her. I didn't know anyone like me would be here, either. I was surprised when Kurama sensed you, too. And Gaara. Phew had a sad look on her face at the mention of his name. That's part of why I wanted to talk to you. Koumei said that the Ichibai is hurting Gaara. Naruto led Phew to the kitchen table, each taking a seat. Gaara isn't bad, Naruto. He's being controlled. Ichibai can take over, force Gaara to do bad things. Koumei's chakra chased Ichibai away, that's why Gaara stopped attacking that boy in the green suit. Lee. Naruto said. His name is Lee. The medics said his injuries could have been so much worse if the sand would have squeezed harder. Phew opened her mouth to say something, but changed her mind, casting her eyes to the table. Kurama said Gaara's seal is broken. Mine is, too. Phew's eyes snapped to his. I broke it, though. Trying to get out. Cocking her head to the side, Phew looked confused. Trying to get out? You can't just walk in and out. Someone messed with my seal. They locked me in there. Naruto wasn't sure how much he should tell her, but she seemed nice. Chipper. I had to alter the seal a bit to get out, but I broke some other stuff. Phew looked dazed for a moment, as if seeing something far away. Then, her whole body jolted. Oh. Koumei wants to talk to Kurama. She scooted her chair closer, holding out her fist. Fist bump me. It will connect them. The moment their knuckles touched, Naruto felt like he was falling into darkness. It wasn't until the water sloshed around his ankles that the feeling stopped. He was back in the dark, flooded dungeon. To his left was a bright light, a large, glowing net holding in a huge beetle. Much like Kurama, the beetle's voice echoed around them. Hello, brother. The beetle said. Kurama growled. Oh, don't be like that. The sage did not like it when we fought. Hot air blew through Naruto's hair as Kurama let out a deep breath. Do not talk about the sage, Koumei. No one who enjoys being locked up can speak his name. I do not enjoy this, brother. I made the best of a terrible situation. Young Phew did not choose for me to be placed inside of her. Much as that boy did not ask for you. Again, Kurama let out a low growl. And we both know no one would ask for Shukaku. There was a clicking sound as Koumei readjusted his elytra, the translucent white wings showing for a moment. As angry as you are, Kurama, even you can't bring yourself to allow Shukaku to torture a child. Surely. Large yellow eyes shone through the bars. Do not assume you know me, Koumei. Fu interrupted the two Baiju's conversation. Are there no lights over there? She was looking at Naruto. I can't see him. As if the sun rising, a bright yellowish light slowly illuminated the room. That's better. Wait. Naruto turned around, glaring at the fox. You could do this the whole time. A tail swatted the bars. I didn't do this, brat. Koumei did. Then, mumbled under his breath, Kurama added, I could if I wanted to. Grumpy fox. Naruto rolled his eyes. Hiding a giggle behind her hand, Fu watched the two interact. She glanced at Koumei, who just fluttered his wings. Can we get back to the matter at hand? Koumei directed it toward Kurama. We can help that boy if you would cooperate. An orange ear twitched. Talk to the brat. He's adept in Fuinjutsu. Well, Fu clapped her hands together, let's see what we're working with. She ran over and grabbed Naruto's hand. I wonder how different our seals are? Oh, this is so fun. When the two kids exited the mindscape, Naruto had a smile on his face. As strange as this whole situation was, he felt elated at having someone who completely understood. He finally found someone just like him. With his hands full of groceries, Sasuke walked beside Kakashi, deep in thought. The exams proved to Sasuke how much he relied on his chakra. Without it, he felt he was gravely limited in his skills. Ninja tools are fine, but Sasuke wanted something with a little more kick. More flair. How many Kunao did you kids lose in the forest? Kakashi turned his head, seeing Sasuke staring ahead, unseeing. Sasuke. You okay? The boy blinked. When we passed your test, you told me about Kenjutsu. I never tried it. Do you want to? Shuffling the groceries to one hand, Kakashi pointed toward the alley. We can go have a look. K, the man who detailed Sakura's sword in pink leather, had his shop in that direction. The alley would be a shortcut. Sasuke nodded, following Kakashi's lead. When Kei saw them coming, he gave Sasuke a big smile. Did she like the sword? Very much, Sasuke said with a smirk, remembering the crushing hug she'd caught him and Naruto in. Kei smiled, clapping his hands together. The smell of coal and melted metal permeating the air. Well, what can I do for you today? Sasuke is looking for a weapon. Kakashi took his free hand and placed it on Sasuke's shoulder. Something that's not the Kyubikuribasho. With his arms, he motioned to the displays around them. Take a look, kid. Let me know if you see anything you like. The wooden shelves, made of dark mahogany, held a wide selection of weapons. From the standard Tanto and Wakaizushi to the ornate Otaki and Katana, the shelves were full of shiny metal, polished to perfection. Slowly, Sasuke walked around, looking for something that caught his eye. He paused in front of a shiny katana with a dragon carved into the base of the blade, but moved on. It wasn't until he arrived at the other side did Sasuke find the weapon. Or, well, weapons, plural. Placed on two wooden stands, two-blade tonfa sat gleaming in the light. The blades were as long as his forearm, the handle wrapped in shiny black leather. Setting the groceries on the floor, Sasuke reached out slowly, wrapping his hand around the handle. It was lighter than he expected, perfectly balanced. The blades had a razor's edge, the front edge curving up into a sharp, impelling point. They were both jet black with blood-red accents. Sasuke turned around, blade still held tight in his hand. Kakashi. He held up his arm. These. Whoa, kid. Kei leaned back against the counter. Those aren't for beginners. Those you get when you master it. He pulled out two wooden tonfa, smooth and missing blades. We train with these, first. Sasuke gave the forger a flat look. He's right, Sasuke. Kakashi took the blade from his hand, testing the sharpness against his finger. It sliced through the skin so easily Kakashi didn't even feel it. We don't want anyone missing a finger, now, do we? Sakura started off with Kyubikuribasho. You don't have to learn these in a week, Sasuke. You've got a whole month. That is plenty of time for you to start off slower. He turned to Kei. I'll make sure he gets trained up properly. Then, turning back to Sasuke, he smiled. It might surprise you to know that Guy is a master with Tonfa. I'm sure he will be delighted to train you in the art. Sasuke tilted his head. I've never seen him use a weapon. He doesn't have to. But once Guy decides he wants to learn something, he doesn't stop until he's mastered it. Kakashi chuckled. Training with him will be an experience. He is nothing like training with me. As Kakashi chatted with Kei, who was supposed to be wrapping up his new tonfa, a deep blue bow caught his eye. When he was a child, Itachi had taught Sasuke archery. He'd worked so hard to master it, wanting to make his big brother proud. The day he knocked Itachi's arrow out of the bullseye with his own arrow, Itachi smiled down at him and ruffled his hair. Sasuke remembered smiling so hard his cheeks hurt as Itachi gave him a piggyback ride home. Pulling it off the rack, Sasuke added the bow, a quiver, and a pile of arrows to the order. The Hyuga compound is very neatly divided. Not equally, but divided nonetheless. When you first enter the compound you are greeted by houses from the main family. Elaborate traditional-styled homes with carved columns and expensive shoji panels sit around large, neat gardens and ponds with happy koi fish of all sizes and colors. In the center of the houses sits a building more elaborate than the rest, the main family clan meeting room. The back of the compound, which the only entrance is hidden between two lavish gardens, leads to the branch family. Although still more elaborate than the civilian houses, they are very obviously not as elaborate as the main family. The gardens are smaller, less neat. The ponds are smaller, no koi fish but plain goldfish. At the front of the branch family area was a bigger building that held clan meetings where both the main and branch leaders would attend. That is where Niji usually was taken for meetings. When his father died, when they were deciding Niji's new home, when they decided how Niji would train, that's when he'd been inside. But always as a silent witness, never allowed to object, never allowed an opinion. Now, however, Niji stood outside of the main family meeting room. There were whispers as the elders walked past him. They talked about the audacity of Niji to outshow a member of the main family. Once they had all entered the building, Hinata stood on the other side of the path. She gave him a small smile before returning to spiraling chakra in her hand. As he watched, she swept her arm, leaving a thin trail of chakra in the air. A small quirk to her lips as she did so, seemingly finding what she was looking for. With his arms crossed, leaning against a fence post, Niji watched her, wondering what she could possibly be doing. He didn't have a chance to ask, however, the door to the meeting room opened. Taking his place beside Hinata, he watched as the elders all filed out of the room, all sneering at Niji, eyes cold. The last to leave was Hayashi. Niji took in his uncle, his constantly present expression of impatient disapproval like a mask on his face. The man stood tall, hands hidden in his long sleeves, until the elders were too far away to hear him. Taking a knee between Hinata and Niji, Hayashi placed a hand on each of their shoulders. No matter what those old men say, Niji, you did well. I may say it precious little, but I am proud of both of you. Your will of fire has grown bright. They need to learn to raise the next generation up and move themselves out. Hayashi sighed and squeezed both of their shoulders before standing up. The cold, indifferent mask already in place. Dismissed. Return to training. Before the kids could get to the end of the path, Hayashi called out to Niji. There are some techniques you need smoothed out. Tomorrow morning, at dawn, come to our dojo so I can show you the proper way. Stunned to silence, Niji just blinked. Had his uncle just offered to train him? No, he couldn't have heard that right. Hinata pulled on his arm, snapping him back into reality. Why yes, sir. The smile Hinata hid in her collar was bright. Niji had a difficult time keeping one off of his face, as well. From the moment he was allowed out of the hospital, Lee had been training. Everyone seemed to find the need to tell him how great he did in the fight, how amazing he was for holding out as long as he did. They didn't realize how bad it hurt to hear those words. Lee did not become a taijutsu-based ninja because he thought it would make a great gimmick. He was born with the inability to use his chakra externally. Arduous training was required to learn basic chakra skills like walking on water or up walls. As for ninjutsu or genjutsu, it was impossible. But what Lee lacked in chakra use, he more than made up for in perseverance. Solely focusing on the one ninja skill he could excel at, Taijutsu, Lee worked his body beyond its limits. All that paid off when, as a genin, he was considered a Taijutsu master. None of that mattered when people would say they were surprised he held out that long. Holding out wasn't what Lee was aiming for. He wanted to win. He wanted to prove that he didn't need ninjutsu or genjutsu to be a splendid ninja. The medics had told Lee how lucky he was. A little more pressure, one more squeeze of the sand, and Lee would have had a broken back. As it was, he had a couple of bruised ribs and pulled muscles. But Lee didn't count on luck. Lee counted on skill. So, here he stood, in a training field, utterly destroying wooden poles as he fought through the pain. Every breath felt like a stab to the chest, every movement causing sharp pain to shoot over his chest. He didn't realize how shallow his breathing had become until the world around him darkened. Mid-kick, Lee began to fall backward. Lee. He felt someone catch him, calloused hands brushing against his skin. "You're supposed to be resting." Opening his eyes, he was met with Tenten's worried brown eyes looking back. "Just because it wasn't a serious injury doesn't mean you shouldn't let it heal." Trying to sit up, Lee hissed in pain. Before Tenten could fuss over him, Lee waved her off. "I have to train, Tenten. I cannot just hold out, I need to win." Confused, Tenten tilted her head. "I don't understand, Lee. Is this because you lost the fight?" Tenten had seen Lee determined, seen him take on enemies unflinchingly. She had never seen him angry. He leveled her with a look, making the girl step back. "Go ahead, Tenten. Say it. You are surprised I held out as long as I did with only Taijutsu. It was luck. I have heard it all." He turned his back to her. "Please, do not say it again." Tenten watched as Lee hung his head, bracing his arm on the training post. With her eyes narrowed, Tenten stomped in front of him. Putting one hand on her hip, she jabbed the pointer finger of the other against his breastbone. "Do you think that little of me, Lee? Have we not been teammates for over a year? If other people can't see that you are living proof ninja do not need chakra to be amazing, then screw them. But I have never thought that about you. Don't you dare tell me that I'm pitying you. Because I'm not. What I am saying is, as someone who has had bruised ribs before, they hurt like hell and it's hard to breathe properly. All you are doing is making sure they take longer to heal than usual because you keep hurting them." At Lee's shocked face, Tenten relaxed her stance. "Honestly, Lee, you're my teammate. I don't want to see you hurt." She stretched out her hand, waiting for Lee to take it. After a moment of moving his eyes between her face and her hand, Lee finally took it. "Thank you, Tenten." It took Tenzo 3 days, but he finally managed to match the children up with their root profiles. Danzo kept detailed notes and backgrounds on the orphans he took. If a background could be known, it seemed Danzo dug it up. So, as Tenzo flipped through the profiles, matching them with the names the children had given him, he realized that they all had their previous memories wiped. Just like Tenzo, they were given a blank slate that Danzo could paint however he wanted to. Thankfully, Ori's past wasn't worth keeping around. The boy belongs to 2 teenagers who hid the pregnancy from their parents. Ori was born in a toilet, his fragile skull hitting hard enough on the porcelain to cause permanent brain damage. Wrapped in a towel, the boy was left in front of the hospital for a medic to find on a smoke break. From there, little else was known. Tenzo figured it was because Danzo had wiped that information from existence. Ori not knowing the information of how he came into the world wasn't important for him to remember. Kari's story was one that was told often. Both of her parents died in battle when she was barely 2. Her grandparents were too sick to care for her, and no other family wanted burdened with her. So, she was handed over to the orphanage and plucked out by Danzo. So many other children had similar stories, similar backgrounds that led them to a fate they did not deserve. However, one stood out to him. A young girl that goes by Zeph, code name Greyhound. You could tell just by looking at her that she was Inyazuka. How Danzo managed to get his hands on her, Tenzo couldn't imagine. He couldn't see that headstrong clan leader allowing any of her pack to be taken by that monster. Was she shifted over from Umbu? Did the clan think she was dead? According to Zeph, She had just turned 14 a month prior. She looked younger, but with eyes that had seen more than she should have. Being post-graduation exam, she had the same emotionless monotone way of speaking all root agents have. Tenzo had removed the children from the dark musty basement and into a cleaner, brighter safe house. This one had couches and overstuffed chairs with large windows that let the summer air inside. Calling Anumbu to his side, he sent a message to Inyazuka-tsum. Since Zeph was a member of the clan, Tenzo felt it only fair that they are the ones who talk to her. With the news of an Inyazuka found among the children, Tsum came fast, accompanied by her daughter, Hana. The two entered the room with their ninkin. Instantly, the children who did not undergo the graduation exam huddled together, scared. Hana whispered to the dogs, who trotted back out the door. With them gone, the children unraveled themselves from each other. Tenzo. Tsum wasted no time in finding the one who messaged her. Your letter said Danzo had one of ours. He gave her a sharp nod. She's already undergone the graduation exam. The look on Tsum's face showed she knew exactly what that meant. She did not arrive with Ninkin and hasn't said anything about it. Her name is Zeph. There was a visible jolt that went through Hana. Zeph? No, it can't be. She's supposed to have died years ago along with her two Ninkin. She grabbed at her mother's arm. Rara's daughter. Addressing the group, Tenzo called Zeph up front. Like a good little soldier, she stood perfectly still beside them, waiting for orders. Hana was visibly shaken as she took the young girl in. Zeph, you understand that, with Danzo's death, any rules or orders of silence are now revoked. The girl nodded. Okay. How did Danzo get you, Zeph? Hana asked, trying hard to keep her composure. Tilting her head to the side, Zeph considered the question. I was dying. Lord Danzo rescued me. To pay him back, I became his soldier. Where are your Ninkin? Tsum looked like she didn't want the answer, but had to ask. It was the first time Zeph had shown any emotion. She took a deep breath before speaking. On my 12th birthday, I was ordered to kill them. When I resisted, Lord Danzo used a jutsu that made my Ninkin attack me. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her voice continued in the same monotone. It was, to kill my emotions, to make me the perfect weapon. As all good shinobi should be. With a gasp, Hana lunged forward, grabbing Zeph so quickly her fight or flight threatened to kick in. Instead, Hana just held onto her, hugging her close. There was no flare of chakra, no bite of steel, just the warm feeling that soaked into her chest. For one panicked moment, Zeph thought it was a genjutsu, but it wasn't that, either. This was the feeling she had after an intense training session when they would lay near, one behind her head, the other across her stomach. Spoken into her hair, Zeph heard Hana whisper, how did the fight end? She hadn't thought about it in years. She fought better, was stronger, when the memory didn't invade her thoughts. But it came flooding back as if she was still there, still in that moment. The tangy scent of blood, the coppery taste in her mouth, the haggard breathing of Maro as he limped toward her, one paw hanging ripped and useless and bleeding. The feel of Saika's fur as she laid, motionless, beside her. Whatever jutsu Lord Danzo had used on her Ninkin had wore off. Now, instead of the wrong red color, Maro's eyes returned to the color of a flickering flame. As he laid behind her head, offering his side as a pillow as he always did, Zeph let the tears run down her face. Saika let out a low whine, cracking one eye open. Ocean blue eyes looked up at her, sad and tired. Using the last of her strength, Zeph pulled the dog on top of her, draping Saika over her stomach just the way she liked. Then everything went black. When she came to, she was in a hospital bed. Lord Danzo stood over her, congratulating Zeph on her promotion to full root agent. Tears flowed from Zeph as she sobbed into Hana's shoulder. The story was choked out, said between body-racking sobs and nearly distinguishable words. A hand began gently rubbing the girl's back, some trying hard to hold in her own tears. You were forced to kill your Ninkin during an enemy capture. There will be no charges held against you, Zeph. Some looked up at Tenzo, her eyes red-rimmed and shining. May we take her home? Tenzo nodded. Of course. Some turned to leave, but stopped, and glanced at Tenzo over her shoulder. Those other children. Were they all dealt a similar hand? Yes. Although some were too young for Danzo's graduation. Nodding, Tsum dropped her eyes to the ground. They will need rehabilitating. They are welcome in the Inyazuka compound. Dogs are therapeutic. It would do them good to help out. As Tenzo watched Zeph be led out of the building by Hana, who never let the girl out of her hands, followed by Tsum who had her shoulders drooped, he knew that girl would be okay. As hard as Tsum likes to act, she's still a mother. And this girl is part of her pack. The other children drew his attention once more, all looking at him for an explanation. He hoped these children would soon find a way to rehabilitate just as Zeph did. Before Nara Yoshino was a mother, she was a Chiryunin. Proficient in taijutsu and ninja tools, Yoshino was a force to be reckoned with. She could take on men, who are twice her size, and win. That, coupled with her natural instincts, made her a sought-after Chiryunin in her time. Although being a ninja never leaves the forefront of your mind. Being a mother overrides those learned behaviors. So, when Shikamaru stepped into the house, head down and shoulders drooped, Yoshino knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Shikaku had a hand on Shikamaru's shoulder and a sad look on his face. The boy should have been excited. The Chiryunin exams were practically an event in Konoha. What happened? Drying her hands on a towel, Yoshino walked toward the two males. Shikamaru went stiff, then ran to his mother. He wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face against her. Shocked, Yoshino rubbed his back as she looked up at Shikaku. Oh my, what happened? Shikaku scrubbed a hand over his face. Ino got hurt. Bad. Yoshino gasped. She will be okay. Inoichi is with her. His eyes looked down at Shikamaru before meeting his wife's eyes again. It was hard to see. Petting through Shikamaru's hair, Yoshino used her other hand to tilt his head up. Ino is strong. She will be back to bossing you around in no time. She gave him a small smile. However, I don't think that is the only thing bothering my son. Am I right? The exams got infiltrated. Yoshino's eyes snapped to her husband. Orochimaru. Her eyes flicked between his and her son's. It's easy to be calm in the moment. It's afterward that everything hits you. 3 days had passed, in which Shikamaru split his time between visiting Ino and staring at a shogi board. With Shikaku busy at work dealing with the backlash of Danzo's death and the new root children that had appeared, Yoshino decided that it was her turn to drag Shikamaru out of his shell. So, Yoshino sat on the other side of the shogi board, taking the place of his invisible opponent. I understand that you made it to the finals. A mother would think that would be news her son would want to share with her. Shikamaru just shrugged. Who is your opponent? He moved a piece on the board. Suzuki. Really? Although not as good at the game as her husband, Yoshino could hold her own. After all, before Shikamaru came along, it was her that was Shikaku's constant opponent. Interesting matchup. Have any strategy in mind? Give up. After a beat, the board went flying against the wall, pieces scattered everywhere. Shikamaru jumped, nearly falling backward. Yoshino's eyes were on fire as she looked at her son. What did you just say? Absolutely not, boy. She stood up on her knees, hands on her hips. All that training you've been doing, all those new jutsu your father trusted you to learn, got you into the finals. I'm not letting you just give up. Before Shikamaru could say anything, a hand slapped over his mouth. Ino will be fine, Shikamaru. The medics have told you why she's still unconscious. Her body is healing the best way it can, by sleeping. You think she would want you to just sit on your ass after all that work you put in? After sitting still for a minute, just gaping at his mother, Shikamaru pushed himself up. Where are you going? To find Koji. He was trained by Suzuki. He would know the best way to beat him. With his hands in his pockets, Shikamaru strolled out through the front gate. Sitting back on her heels, Yoshino smiled, proud of her lazy son. With a stack of papers slowly receding on his desk, Hiruzen felt he'd done enough work to warrant a smoke break. One benefit of being Hokage, he could sit in his office and smoke. Tobirama-sensei was probably rolling in his grave, but he wasn't there to yell at him about how tobacco is bad for you. Sensei never quite understood the soothing sounds of grinding his own tobacco, or the calming movements of packing it in the bowl, of lighting it, of the first draw. Hokage-sama. Hiruzen jumped, the pipe flying onto his desk and the smoke inhaled too quickly into his lungs. The double doors slammed open, a flustered Chiryunin sliding to a stop in front of his desk. Are you okay, sir? Hiruzen could only imagine what he looked like, frantically tamping out smoldering tobacco on his wooden desk while coughing hard enough to send tears streaming down his face. Why yes. I am fine. Finally, as the coughing fit died down, Hiruzen waved the man on. What happened? The scouts reported that Lady Tsunade is headed back toward Konoha. The Chiryunin watched as Hiruzen's eyes widened. Her apprentice is accompanying her. Along with Jiraiya, sir. Are you sure? The Chiryunin nodded. One more thing, sir. It, appears that Jiraiya is tied up. Lady Tsunade is dragging him, sir. There's ninja wire wrapped around his, well, the man motioned from his navel down to his upper thigh. It seems that Jiraiya is not resisting, of course. There was a beat of silence before Hiruzen began laughing. From out in the hallway, his ever-faithful Umbu was also snickering. Chapter 34, Learning Something New. So, Tsunade was sipping on a bottle of sake that Jiraiya had pulled from his bag. Should we discuss your issues, now? Just coming off of Tsunade's heart-to-heart, Jiraiya felt emotionally spent. Maybe later. You've had a big night. Oh, come off it. She threw a twig at him. Your godson is a genin. Adorable little shit. Minato's hair and eyes. Kushina's F-dash. Kushina's face. I know. There wasn't anything Jiraiya wanted to talk about less than his failing of that boy. I made a decision and I stuck with it. This is nothing like your situation, Tsunade. Honey Eyes leveled a glare at him. It's not. I'm not running from that boy. An empty sake bottle went flying toward Jiraiya's head. Naruto. That boy's name is Naruto. Remember? It was your book that named him. Orochi dash. Tsunade bowled over him. Orochimaru chose his path, Jiraiya. There was nothing either me or you could have done to stop him. He's obsessed with power and immortality. Absolutely none of that was your responsibility. She watched as Jiraiya drained his bottle of sake. How do you know what Naruto looks like, Jiraiya? The only answer she got was Jiraiya standing up and attempting to walk off. He barely got 3 steps before a large crack formed in the ground. Trees shook around him, swaying with the force of the punch Tsunade's fist caused. As the ground shook, Jiraiya lost his balance, one leg getting trapped in the crack. Trying to pull himself out, he pushed against the ground, pulled his body up as far as he could. He began to yell, to fight, to swear, but Tsunade was having none of it. With a tap to his temple, Jiraiya saw black. A huge bump jarred Jiraiya awake. He had dirt in his eyes, something tightly binding his arms and legs together, and a gag in his mouth. Trying hard to make some sort of noise, work a limb loose, anything, he suddenly stopped moving. Mumbling against the gag, Jiraiya wriggled on the ground. Then Honey Eyes appeared in front of his face. I was starting to think I actually killed you, Tsunade smirked. Jiraiya glared. You were out for, about 2 days? I think. Long enough for us to almost be to Konoha. Jiraiya's eyes widened. So, one thing I should tell you. Since I knew you would fight me on this, I took a special precaution. Along with your arms and legs, another appendage is wrapped up. Her eyes flicked down. It's razor wire. Might want to behave if you ever want to use that thing again. Before that piece of information could settle into his brain, he was being dragged along again. Lady Tsunade. A pair of blue sandals landed in front of his face. Jiraiya looked up as far as he could, trying to see who was there. Are you okay? From somewhere above his head, Shizune giggled. Oh, yes, I'm fine. Tsunade had that sickly sweet voice she only uses when trying to get her own way. Can you let Sarutobi-sensei know we're on our way? He will want to see this, I'm sure. There was some excessive wriggling from Jiraiya. Hey. Stay still unless you want something removed. There was a pause before Blue Sandals began laughing. I'll let him know, ma'am. About 1,000 feet, Jiraiya. Then we will be at the gates. No stranger to humiliating himself, Jiraiya knew how to let it roll off of him. However, being tied down and dragged through the streets was new. Having razor wire next to his most important appendage was also new. At least, he was assuming Tsunade wasn't lying about the razor wire. He honestly doesn't want to challenge it. The moment Sasuke and Kakashi stepped on the path, they knew someone else had been there. If it was a ninja, they did not mask their presence. Either they were stupid or they weren't an enemy. Their hands were full of groceries and weapons as they made their way to the porch, bags crinkling and metal clanging. There was no point in being quiet. This was their home. Talking could be heard inside, a female voice along with Naruto's infectious giggle. The voice sounded familiar. Sasuke couldn't quite place where he'd heard it before. Without hesitation, Kakashi pushed the screen door open. A young girl with green hair and orange eyes sat at the kitchen table. She looked nervous as Kakashi swept past them, unloading his bags on the kitchen counter. Then, turning back around, Kakashi clapped his hands together. Hello. Naruto jumped up off the chair, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Oh. Oh. Sensei. Sensei. This is Fu and she came here to talk to me about Gaara and she's just like me and we went in there with both of them and dash. Whoa, kiddo. Kakashi leaned down, giving Naruto his full attention. It helped calm the boy down when his hyperactive nature got too intense. This is Fu. Naruto nodded. Kakashi looked up at the girl. Hello, Fu. Welcome to our home. Fu stood up and gave Kakashi a respectful introduction, bowing at the waist. I don't want to disturb you. I only wanted to meet Naruto. You're not disturbing anything. He smiled at her, putting the girl at ease. I'm Kakashi. This is Sasuke. There's a third one, too, but Sakura splits her time between here and her home. Putting his forearms on the counter, Kakashi leaned forward. You did great in your prelims match, Fu. That blinding powder is something else. As Fu preened under Kakashi's praise, Sasuke took the weapons to the living room. He'd been excited on the way home to show Naruto, to ask the blonde to make him a seal to keep the blade tonfa safe. He had a month to learn them, which Sasuke knew he would, but he wanted to share it with his best friend. Something ran through him when Naruto acted so excited to show off this girl. Sasuke remembered this feeling, he just hadn't felt it in a long time. Not since Itachi put off training with him to go somewhere with Shisui. Whatever the feeling was, Sasuke hated it. Hey. Naruto put his hands on the back of the chair, watching Sasuke lay the weapons out on the coffee table. The deep blue bow was leaned against the couch beside the quiver. I didn't know you knew archery. With his emotions on edge, Sasuke had a retort on the tip of his tongue. But when he looked up, Naruto looked so unsure that Sasuke bit the words back. Why should he be mad that Naruto has friends? Did he deserve it? Taking a deep breath, Sasuke dropped the bag of shuriken on the floor. Itachi taught me when I was little. Oh, are you going to use it in the finals? Picking at the fabric of the chair, Naruto looked at his hands. With Kakashi's voice in the background keeping Fu's attention, Sasuke waved Naruto over. I'm not sure if the bow would be good against Shikamaru. But, hopefully, this will be. Slowly unwrapping the tonfa, Sasuke watched as Naruto's eyes lit up. Whoa. Naruto reached out to touch one shining blade. That is badass. Sasuke smirked. His eyes flicked up to Fu when she laughed loudly. Why is she here? She's a Jinchuriki, too. Sasuke's eyebrow shot up at Naruto's words. The Nanabi, Kome. He's a huge bug. Flicking his eyes over to Fu, Sasuke took the girl in. As a Jinchuriki, no one would understand Naruto better. And, from what Sasuke remembers about the prelims, Fu seemed to have just as much energy as Naruto did. So, what are we doing about Gaara? It's complicated. Naruto heaved out a sigh. It's not just broken, but it was put on broken. Kakashi's voice rang out, calling the two boys into the kitchen. Come and sit down, boys. While the boys took their seats, Kakashi looked back at Fu. I should ask you where your bodyguards are, phew. No one would send a Jinhuriki, no matter how controlled they are, without some sort of support. The two who excused themselves from the preliminary matches had to be some sort of bodyguards. Do they even know you're here? I snuck out. Phew bit her lip, waiting for disapproval. Instead of disapproving, Kakashi laughed. Do you do that a lot? The sheepish look the girl gave him spoke volumes. Should we expect two angry jounin at our door? Phew shrugged. Well, let's get a head start before they show up, then. What did you and your Baijuyo figure out about Gaara's seal? The two Jinhuriki exchanged looks. Naruto sighed. It's not just broken, sensei. It was put on broken. Our seals have a failsafe built in. It stops our Baijuyo from taking over our minds, keeps our, consciousness. Phew supplied. Yeah, consciousness separated. With Gaara, there is no failsafe. Sitting forward, Phew looked serious for a minute. During the prelims, Komei used his chakra to calm Gaara down. It made the Ichibai retreat. As long as I stood close to him, Ichibai never came back out. Komei thinks that the seal can be fixed, but it might be dangerous. I need to do some more research. I can do this, sensei. Kakashi put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Of course you can, Naruto. No one is doubting that. I don't want you to get hurt in the process. Which, Phew gave Naruto a serious look, is why we are triple checking we have everything we need. Every base covered, plans B through Z, everything perfect. We only get one chance. Rolling his eyes, Naruto nodded. Yes, Phew. It took a couple of days for Kisame to think over what Itachi told him. Against everything he believed in, Kisame believed Itachi. The kid had never lied to him, never led him astray. His whole worldview had been challenged a lot lately. For once, the main room was pretty empty. Kisame stood in the entrance to the tunnel, one forearm braced on the stone. Zetsu was prowling around. Samehada kept shivering and shuddering in regular intervals, something he only did with that plant thing's chakra. Sitting on the rock that was seemingly reserved for himself, Itachi was lying back, eyes closed as the sun beat down on him. Ever since the kid's trip to Konoha, he'd been lighter. Almost happier. The words from that night hiding out in Itachi's sleeping quarters came back to him. Itachi had chosen his brother above his clan and village. He'd heard Uchiha had the ability to love so deeply it turned into outright devotion. Seeing it in action was another story altogether. A movement in the rock caught his attention. Samehada gave a deep shudder as Zetsu emerged above Itachi's head. Zetsu's torso and head leaned over the teen, blocking out the sun. Obito would like to speak with you. They waited for Itachi to crack an eye open before receding back into the wall. Kisame caught a glimpse of the orange mask just inside the hallway, quietly talking to Itachi. The main room was empty. Then his eyes fell on the door. Was there someone else pulling the strings? Were they behind that door? Konan and Pain disappeared behind there after every meeting. There were times Obito disappeared behind it, also. What is in there? He stood in the doorway, arguing with himself for a couple of moments. Oh, fuck it. Kisame pushed himself off the wall and headed for the door. Whatever Kisame was expecting, it wasn't what he got. A very startled Konan jumped when the door opened. She tried to throw out paper, anything to block Kisame's vision. The man in the wheelchair, his body thin and weak, long red hair hanging over his face, had his purple eyes wide. Pain, or at least the body, was standing against the wall, eyes closed and motionless. Samehada ripped through the chakra-infused paper. What are you doing? Obito's voice reached a pitch Kisame had never heard before. From behind him, Itachi looked shocked. Hiking a thumb towards the room, Kisame snarled at Obito. More liars. I hate liars. Samehada hissed, begging to fight. This pure world bullshit you sold me is a lie, too, isn't it? What do you really want, Obito? There was a hissing sound, a paper bomb slowly burning through before Itachi dissolved in a murder of crows. They swirled around Kisame as the paper bomb exploded, sending Obito flying backward. It wouldn't kill him, but it should slow him down. Kisame felt himself being lifted up and carried out of the cave. Once in the sunlight, Itaki reformed. Run. With Kisame being as big and muscular as he was, Itaki's crows could only carry him so far. They would have to run the rest of the way. It wasn't until they were past the first row of trees that Kisame spoke again. Where are we going? Someplace safe. As Itaki ran, crows took off from the trees, heading in many different directions. The crows will give them false leads. Then, with some hand signs, a clone of Itaki popped into existence. It was quickly passed by at the rate they were running. Do you trust me, Kisame? He should have hesitated. He should have thought it through. Instead, Kisame nodded. Yeah. Running through the yard, Sakura raced toward the house. Kakashi's 9 dogs were running all over, chasing each other, playing and being dogs. Pakun waved at her from his spot on the bottom step, but Sakura just ran past him. She had something to do. She needed her sensei. The stomping on the porch was the only warning the guys, and few, had before the door was slammed open. The heavy wood bounced off the walls as Sakura headed straight for Kakashi. I need training. I need revenge. I need to kill that bitch. Kakashi grabbed her by the biceps, picking her up and plopping her down on the kitchen counter. Sakura, listen to me. Listen good. Revenge isn't the cathartic experience it's made out to be. It's hollow. It doesn't fix anything. Sweetheart, revenge isn't what you want. I want to make her pay for what she did to Ino. Sakura's green eyes shined in defiance. If you won't train me, I'll find someone who will. She struggled to get free, but Kakashi held firm. I will not allow you to do something as destructive as revenge. At the boom in Kakashi's voice, Sakura stopped struggling. Kakashi had never yelled at them, never raised his voice unless it was barking orders during a fight. Revenge is an all-consuming fire. It takes you over, makes you a shell of your former self. In getting revenge, you hurt people who did nothing wrong. That is not you, Sakura. He glanced at the other 3 kids in the room. This goes for all of you. Revenge isn't the answer. Sakura, you want to get back at her for what she did, then fight her fair and square. Winning feels better than killing. Trust me. What had begun as angry tears soon became sad tears. Sakura flung herself forward, burying her head in Kakashi's chest. She's not waking up. Honey, she will. Give her body time to heal. He pet through her hair. Sitting in that hospital isn't helping your sanity, love. Let's put all that restless energy into training. But we are training to win, not kill. She nodded against his chest but stayed tight against him. Oh, you kids have been through a lot in a short amount of time, haven't you? Changing the timeline wasn't an easy task. In changing one thing, several others were changed in turn. He may have made his kids stronger, may have made them physically ready for anything, but they were still just kids. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged looks, both speaking without words. They were as worried for Sakura as Kakashi was. Hey, sensei can't train me, can he? Sakura sniffled before sitting back. 'Cause he's the proctor. Kakashi nodded. You're right, but we will figure something else out. He put a finger under her chin, lifting her head up. And we will make damn sure you are ready. It was then that Sakura registered the other kid in the room. She glanced over at Fia before cocking her head to the side. I'm sorry. Terrible way to meet someone. Oh. Fia sat up straight. No, it's okay. I saw it happen. I would be angry, too. Wiping her eyes, Sakura jumped off the counter. I'm Sakura. Phew. The 2 girls shook hands. You did amazing in your fight. People on the balcony by me kept saying you couldn't lift the sword. They said it was for show. You sure showed them. Sakura giggled. Thank you. She's special to me. I trained hard with her. Then, like a jolt, Sakura remembered something. Oh. What is that powder stuff you used? It blinded everyone. It's scale powder that catches the light, making it shine really bright. Then, with a giggle, Fia added, I rhymed. Sakura slid into Kakashi's empty chair, chin in her hand. There was a beat of silence before Fia spoke again. So, you just know about Kurama, huh? And you don't care. We don't think of Naruto any different since we found out. He's still our annoying little ball of sunshine. She reached over and squeezed Naruto's cheek. He slapped her hand away. It happened to him, it wasn't his choice. Team 10 knows, too. They saw the chakra after I got out of the seal. Naruto got a small smile on his face at the memory. They didn't care, either. No one missed the happiness in his voice knowing he had friends who don't care what is inside him. There was a knock on the door, two voices mumbling from outside. Fu immediately froze before sliding down in the chair. When Kakashi opened the door, it was to greet Tutaki Jounin. I'm very sorry to disturb you, but is our headstrong genin here? The one with curly brown hair asked. Both of the Jounin were standing with their hands behind their backs, a soldier's parade rest. Kakashi turned his head, catching Fu dipping lower and lower in the chair. Green hair and orange eyes. Yes. The second one answered before leaving out a sigh. She left us a note. Going to find Naruto. We asked around and they all sent us here. Huffing out a laugh, Kakashi stepped back, allowing the two inside. I think being stubborn is a trait they share, oddly enough. The curly-haired one laughed. Before you yell, Yoro, just no dash. Cutting her off, the one with spiky black hair, Yoro, bowled over her. Phew. Neither Kigon nor I have given you many rules. We are rational. We let you have fun. We only ask for one thing, do not leave our side. But dash. Kigon sighed. We get it. We know why you wanted to come here. Had you asked, we would have allowed it. Crossing her arms, Fu pouted. No, you wouldn't have. You yelled for helping Gaara. Breaking his parade rest, Yoro knelt down in front of the girl. You put yourself at risk. I understand you were helping that boy. That's what you do, you help people. Sometimes, however, you put yourself at risk in doing that. People could have found out about you. The Ichibai is driving Gaara insane. We can help, Yoro. Naruto knows Fuinjutsu. We have a theory on how to do it. Orange eyes met Naruto's. Right. Nodding, Naruto looked at the two Jounin. I can do it. Fine. Kigon sounded tired. For right now, you're coming back with us. We will get with Hatake for another playdate. Deal. Kakashi laughed. Yeah, Fu. We will set up a time for a playdate. Rolling her eyes, Fu stood up. You better not be lying, you two. She leveled a glare at Yoro and Kigon. I'll let Komei slap you. After Fu said her goodbyes, and the two Jounin got the talkative girl on her way back toward the inn, Kakashi sat down in the newly evacuated chair. Well, that was interesting. Think all Jinhuriki are stubborn. Naruto glared at him. Kakashi laughed and ruffled his hair. The morning dew was still on the grass when Sasuke left the house. It was early, before the sun had even slightly begun to rise. Sasuke had to wriggle out of bed. Naruto was exceptionally clingy during the night, for a reason he didn't understand. At some point, Kakashi's 9 dogs made their way inside the house. They were sprawled all over the living room. Pakun was curled up in the chair under a blanket that had been left lying around. The training field Guy usually occupied was set against the Nara forest. Very few were allowed to use it, but the green-clad man had a way with people. Even before Shikaka had taken over as heir, Guy was allowed to train there. Stepping down the dirt path, Sasuke began to hear the sounds of training. Grunts and groans and thunks of something solid hitting wooden training poles echoed off the trees around him. As soon as the path broke into the clearing, Sasuke saw Guy with a nunchuk in his hands, spinning and twirling it around him, fast, with precision. It was mesmerizing. Hello, Sasuke, Guy spoke up, tucking the nunchuk under his arm. Is there something I can help you with? In each hand, Sasuke held a training tonfa. He raised them up for Guy to see. Kakashi said you are an expert in tonfa? I'm here to ask if you would train me. Sasuke hated how unsure he sounded around people. Telling them off, ordering them around, Sasuke had no problem with. Asking someone for help, and he starts and stops and stutters. Tossing his nunchuk on top of a bag laying against the training pole, Guy held his hand out, waiting for Sasuke to put one tonfa in his hand. He bounced the solid wood in his hand, twirled it around. Nice, even weight. He raised a thick eyebrow. However, these are training tonfa. These would not do you any favors in the finals. Shrugging a canvas bag off his shoulder, Sasuke handed his wrapped blade tonfa to Guy. Once they were unwrapped, Guy's eyes widened. Oh ho ho! Look at these. Sasuke watched in awe as the man held the blades in his hands, spinning them around effortlessly. It was a dance, the blades an extension of his arm. They sliced through the air in a blur of black and red and glinting metal. I want to learn how to do that. Guy laughed, flipping the blades in the air. So, my eternal rival's student comes to me asking for training? I, Konoha's green beast, know something that Sharingan Kakashi does not? How could I say no? Come, Sasuke. Let's begin. The night Hana brought Zeph home, the dogs met them at the compound gate. They could smell the sadness, the festering wound Danzo left behind. Hana watched as Zeph slowed to a stop, halting at the gate. Her eyes were wide as she watched the canines come toward her. The fear inside her wasn't toward the dogs, however. It was toward herself. She was shaking as Hana put a hand on her back, slowly pushing the girl inside. The dogs are well trained, smart, and observant. They walked up to Zeph slowly, nuzzling into her side, licking her hands. One thing Danzo got wrong, emotions cannot be trained out of someone. As Zeph took in the dogs, the memories of her own Ninken came flooding back. Tears came flowing down her face. Why are they here? Zeph looked up at Hana. They know what I did. Why don't they hate me? Because you did not have a choice. Some came up behind her, shooing the dogs back a few feet. They know you didn't want to, Zeph. They knew you were forced. The most amazing thing about dogs? They don't hold a grudge. Slowly, one by one, the dogs began to creep up on Zeph again. This time, the girl dropped to her knees. She let the dogs nuzzle into her, lick the tears from her face. Hana watched the young girl break down while the dogs tried to pick her back up. Dog therapy. She smiled. There's nothing better. That night, Zeph slept on a futon on the floor, surrounded by dogs of all sizes. In the morning, Kiba stood in front of the kennel entrance. Something big had happened yesterday. The clan was whispering with their heads together, talking about a girl they thought was dead. The excitement was echoed in the dogs, who were whinging and acting restless. Even Akamaru was acting strange, not wanting to listen, seemingly wanting to wander around. The kennels were set against a huge clearing. The dogs ran free, not confined to cages like other villages use. They didn't have small dog boxes for shelter, but huge buildings with bedding and food and water. Not being kept separated, the dogs were allowed to mingle together. Pack dynamics were important. The dogs learned quickly who the alpha was and what order they fell in. To learn that, they were kept together. Hana rounded the corner with Zeph, seeing her brother and his Ninken puppy in wait. Akamaru's head shot up before scampering toward the young girl. Akamaru. Kiba looked up, seeing where his dog was headed. A young girl, not much older than he, walked next to Hana. They were followed by several dogs, all keeping in close contact. The closer they got, the more Kiba could see the sadness in the girl's eyes. She was different than the other members of the clan, who all wore their animalistic nature like a banner. Where they all had wild, unkempt hair, hers was short and neat, not a hair out of place. When Hana got closer, with Akamaru following by the girl's ankles, she looked tired. Kiba, this is Zeph. She's going to help you do the feeding this morning. Then, turning to Zeph, she pointed toward the kennel gates. Zeph, can you let these dogs inside the kennel, please? With a sharp nod, the girl walked off, the pack of dogs still following her. Kiba, listen, she was taken when she was young, warped by Danzo. Kiba's eyes widened. He'd heard what that bastard had done. We need to rehabilitate her, bring her back into her own. Following orders is beat into her. You'll have to word what you want her to do as an order, but keep it light. When Hana left, Kiba turned to Zeph, seeing her standing by the gate with the dogs circling her. Taking a deep breath, Kiba smiled at her. All right, Zeph, I'm Kiba. Hana's brother. Akamaru nipped at his ankles. This is Akamaru, my Ninken. He showed her around, showed her where the food was kept, how to prepare it, where the dishes were. Hana was right. If Zeph didn't have a direct order, she would just stand still and wait for one. It was eerie. She was like a machine. No matter how well trained the dogs were, they were still dogs. A small fight broke out between two bigger dogs, lots of growling, snarling and dirt being kicked up. The switch in Zeph was instant. She grabbed the nearest weapon, a pitchfork, and took a stance. Whoa! Kiba grabbed her arm. She turned on him, weapon at the ready. Zeph, damn, stop. They're dogs. They get in dominance fights, it's normal. Everything is okay. Then, remembering what his sister said, added, stand down. As if it burned her, Zeph dropped the pitchfork, stumbling backward into a wall. I am sorry. I won't do it again. She looked like she was preparing herself for something. A reprimand? No, not with how she was holding her arms up. She was preparing herself for a strike. Hey, Kiba knelt down in front of her. It's okay. I'm not mad. Zeph glanced up at him, arms still ready to shield her. Zeph, no one will hurt you here. It will probably take time for you to get used to the dogs again. But you will, I'm sure. It took several minutes before Zeph uncurled herself, standing straight. The two dogs who were at the center of the fight came over, heads down, and tails between their legs. Licking her hands and nuzzling against her, they apologized the only way they could. Very tentatively, the young girl reached out, combing her fingers through the soft fur. She let out a shaky breath. Watching it unfold, Kiba and Akamaru shared a glance. What did Danzo do to her? When you first become a genin team, there is a bond that is formed. You see each other at their best, at their worst, and trust your lives to each other. Included in that is the expectation that you call your sensei by that title. It doesn't matter if they piss you off, it doesn't matter if you don't feel like it, you just do it. Standing in front of Hiruzen, both in their 50s and each powerful in their own right, Jiraiya and Tsunade still bowed their heads and greet the man as Sarutobi-sensei. Well, to be honest, Jiraiya's was very muffled, with the gag still in place, but Hiruzen assumed that's what he said. Tsunade, I understand that Jiraiya often deserves to be punished, but could you please remove the gag? And, perhaps, the wire that is dangerously close to something important to him. With a huff and a roll of her eyes, the woman pulled out a kunai and neatly sliced the fabric. She might have nicked his ear, but that could be excused. Then, with the same kunai, Tsunade reached down to cut the wire. Panicked, Jiraiya looked at his sensei with wide eyes. Before Hiruzen could say anything, the action was already finished. The wire dropped to the ground around his Geta sandals. It was only when he saw Tsunade put the kunai away that Jiraiya let out a breath. Well, that was fun. He took a step back. It's nice to see you, Sarutobi-sensei. The leather strap that held his toad summoning scroll was gripped tightly in a pale hand. Move and I cut off the blood supply down there. Jiraiya stood as still as a human could. Sensei, we have some information on the Akatsuki. They'd practiced this. The way to read Sarutobi-sensei in on their knowledge without letting him know the full story. Gambling houses were full of gossip, and gathering information was Jiraiya's specialty. The two each knowing half of a whole story wasn't out of the realm of possibility. And Jiraiya, with his mouth gagged so he really couldn't say no if he wanted to, wholeheartedly agreed to the plan. Really? The old man put his hands behind his back. What kind of information? The two Sunin shared a look. Well, Jiraiya put his arm around Tsunade's shoulders, earning a glare in the process. See, sensei, Tsunade can't stay away from me. So we met on the road and we're catching up, you see. The thing is, we both know half of the information and didn't know it. We just put it together. Tsunade pushed the man off her. They travel in pairs. We actually have an idea about some of them. They want the Baijuyu and are planning on taking the Jinhiriki one by one. Activating the privacy seal on the wall behind him, Hiruzen took a seat at his desk and pulled out some parchment. All right. Tell me everything you know. The two talked and talked, each and every piece of information carefully picked apart, removing any tells on where it came from. No matter what was said, Tsunade was careful not to mention Itaki or Kisame. The reason why she felt the need to protect them still wasn't entirely clear to her, but Jiraiya could see the steadfast loyalty in her eyes and didn't challenge it. The conversation didn't end until way into the evening. While the two were talking, Shizune had acquired the 2 rooms at an inn. Mentally exhausted from jumping through hoops all evening, the two quickly fell into their beds and fell asleep. In the morning, Tsunade and Shizune joined Jiraiya at a small diner for breakfast. They slid into the booth across from him. Gotta say, Jiraiya, I'm surprised you're still here. Tsunade stirred sugar into her coffee. Really thought you would leave as soon as I was asleep. Well, I thought about it. He sat back in the booth, suddenly looking very weary. But I had a lot of time to think while I was being dragged down the road. It's not because I didn't want the kid, you know. I'd imagine a lot of people thought that. Me being out there, I kept people away from him. No one knew Minato had a kid. They all just assumed the baby died. I kept the rumors up. Eventually, no one worried about it anymore. That was better than me fucking the kid up. He was expecting Tsunade to argue with him. Instead, she just nodded. We were both running away from ghosts. Then, with renewed vigor, Tsunade's eyes met his. This will probably make me a hypocrite, but go face your ghost. The kid didn't do anything wrong, Jiraiya. Don't punish him for something he couldn't control. As the dirt dusted around him as his back hit the ground, Shikamaru cursed. He let his head thump against the ground. His Taijutsu would be no match for Sasuke. If he was going to win, Taijutsu wouldn't be the way. Shikamaru had shadows and a high IQ. Was that enough? Accepting the hand Koji held out for him, Shikamaru got pulled to his feet. You alright, Shikamaru? Yeah. He rubbed the small of his back. Straight one-on-one Taijutsu will not work. He has to have a weakness. Koji tilted his head, looking Shikamaru up and down. You actually want to win this, don't you? I can't protect anyone by running or giving up. If I want to be a ninja, I need to stop being afraid to fight. Shikamaru looked up at Koji's surprised face. Even if I don't win, at least I can say I actually tried. While Shikamaru caught his breath, Koji ran his friend's words through his head. He'd watched Shikamaru outsmart opponents. What he did with that puppet guy in the prelims was a great example. But Sasuke knew Shikamaru, knew how he thought, what he could do, what he could capitalize on. To get one over on Sasuke, Shikamaru needed to think outside the box. It reminded him of when Lee and Sasuke were sparring, how Lee kept using the way Sasuke could fight in the air to his advantage. It's harder to correct your form when you can't plant your feet. Plant your feet. Shikamaru. I think I got it. Koji grabbed his friend by the shoulders. Keep him off the ground. Unless Naruto performs a miracle, he will still have that seal. Meaning he has to focus on Taijutsu. One of his strengths is his greatest weakness. Remember? Lee said it. When Shikamaru still stared back at him, dumbly, Koji groaned. Think. Lee used Sasuke's knack for fighting in the air to turn the tables. You can't correct yourself easily in the air. His form slips. Keep him in the air. Opening his mouth to argue, Shikamaru snapped it closed again. Sasuke would jump out of the way of his shadows. He did it during sparring. What if Sasuke couldn't touch the ground at all? What if it was all one huge shadow? The jutsu was sitting on his desk in his room. He was so focused on shadow walking that Shikamaru forgot about shadow field. He could cover a wide area in a circle of shadows. How long can Sasuke possibly stay in the air? Koji. He got a devilish smile on his face. You, my friend, are a genius. When Kakashi saved Tenzo from Danzo, it became very apparent that being a child soldier didn't leave time for learning any other life skills. If it wasn't going to enhance your fighting abilities, it didn't matter to Danzo. But Kakashi told him differently, told him how important benign life skills are. The first time Tenzo was invited into Kakashi's apartment, he was nervous. An Umbu who served the deep underbelly of the village, who was ordered to assassinate the Hokage, was invited into Kakashi's home. It was surreal. Then a cup of tea was handed to him, the indent of a smile in Kakashi's mask, and Tenzo felt more at ease. Then Kakashi handed him a canvas bag full of yarn, 2 thin wooden dowels, and sat down on a chair. It was the most calming experience of Tenzo's life. With the root kids who had nowhere else to go, which were the vast majority of them, Tenzo secured the safe house as theirs. It was slow going, with the kids still terrified and without orders, but Tenzo knew how that felt. He worked with them, helped them understand they could live a life without constantly being told how to live their lives. It would take them time, but they would come around. The building the safe house resided in, full of sunshine and open windows, sat at the edge of the woods. They weren't far from the markets but were far enough away that people were not constantly walking past the building. The bottom floor had overstuffed couches and chairs in a large room that resembled a living room. Bright white walls caused the sunshine to look brighter than it was. Through an archway off to the side was a small kitchen. Tenzo had it stocked with food that either didn't require cooking or barely required any skills to make. He wasn't sure how much these kids had been taught about cooking. Inside the kitchen were a couple of chairs and a small table. It wasn't enough to seat all the kids at once. A few desks and a couple of bookcases took up another wall, which had a doorway to the small training room. Up some spiral stairs that sat behind the largest of the couches took you to the bunkhouse. Rows of bunk beds lined the 2 longest walls. At the back were lockers, tall and skinny. The kids didn't have much in terms of belongings, so the lockers were unused. After requesting to be off duty for a while, Tenzo took up the job of caring for the kids. He seemed to be the only one they trusted, the only one they would communicate with. So, as Kakashi did for him, Tenzo would help these kids. This morning, he came prepared with a duffel bag thrown over one shoulder and a canvas bag over the other one. As soon as Tenzo hit the door, all of the kids' eyes were on him. 2 days after being saved and they still haven't changed out of their standard uniform. The oversized chest plates and repainted masks have been set aside, but their standard shirts and pants were still intact. Setting the duffel bag down on the coffee table and the canvas bag on the floor, Tenzo began to unzip the former. Inside were clothes of all sizes, hoping each kid could find something that would fit them. Gather round. Tenzo still talked to them as if giving them orders. It was the only way the kids knew to be. And here are clothes. I want you all to find something that fits you, find some sort of outfit, and change out of your uniform. The first to appear at his side was Ori, who bounced toward the bag and began digging through it. Oh, Carrie. He threw a pink shirt toward her. Your favorite color. She caught it in her hands, running her thumb over the soft fabric. Ori pulled out a dark blue long-sleeved shirt and tossed it to Shiro. Isn't that your favorite color? Seeing Ori so excited about the bag led a couple of the other young ones to come forward. Ori would hand the clothes to them, and they would hold them up. One by one, the kids all had an outfit. All the kids took turns using the bathrooms and bunkhouse to change. Within 20 minutes there were no more traditional Umbu uniforms. The kids actually looked like kids. Now what? Ori asked, sitting next to the man on the couch. What's in the other bag? Smiling, Tenzo pulled balls of yarn from the canvas bag. Do any of you kids know how to knit? Confusion was shared through all the kids. Ori shook his head, eyebrows drawn down. You can make many things with this skill. Pass the bag around, everyone takes 1 ball of yarn and 2 knitting needles. After some brief instructions, Tenzo let the kids work in peace. There was some frustration, some missed stitches and starting over, but the kids were doing well. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Tenzo saw Ori manically try to fix a missed stitch. In his effort, he wound up unwinding half of his project. The boy was trying to hide it, trying to keep Tenzo from seeing, but it didn't work. When Tenzo noticed, Ori dropped his head. I'm sorry. I messed it up. I won't do it again. I swear. Hush now, Ori. Tenzo knelt down in front of the kid. He took a hold of the mess of yarn and tried to fix it in some way. The first time I ever did this, Kakashi-senpai taught me. He rescued me much like he rescued you all. We were working on our projects for about an hour and I heard grumbling and a kunao being pulled out. Senpai messed up an entire row, so he just cut it in half. His summon are dogs, so he gave it to them for a chew toy. Tried to tell me he planned it all along. Tenzo huffed out a laugh, handing the semi-fixed project back to Ori. Even the most amazing people make mistakes. It's called being human, kid. He ruffled the stark white hair. You're doing fine. Looking at Tenzo with awe in his eyes, Ori smiled at him. Thank you, Tenzo-senpai. Chapter 35, Safe House. It took a whole day for Jiraiya to work up the courage, 20 minutes to find out where he lived, and 17 deep breaths before arriving at the path to where his godson lived. Hearing that the kid was taken in by Kakashi was a surprise. Even more of a surprise was that Kakashi had revived his old land. What had once been an overgrown mess was now well worn and trimmed up. It seemed, just from the entrance to the path alone, that Kakashi cared for his land much like his father did. With slow footsteps, Jiraiya made his way up the path. It was deathly silent, unnaturally so. Almost as if the area was devoid of sound. Like the area was in a vacuum. Then, once he stepped into the yard, it was as if removing earplugs. All the sound returned. Looking around, Jiraiya tried to find the cause of the silence. If he were to guess, it would be Fuinjutsu, but he couldn't be sure. If they were there, however, Jiraiya couldn't see them. No telltale glowing of runes and symbols embedded into tree bark. Interesting. The sound of something heavy hitting wood reached his ears. A small girl with soft pink hair was holding out a large sword sideways. Holding it parallel to the ground, she used the hunk of metal to bounce a white rubber ball. Standing next to her was a boy with dark hair, his arms crossed as he watched her try to keep the ball in the air and keep the sword steady. Before long, Naruto came bounding out of the house, waving a piece of parchment in his hand. His loud voice echoed through the clearing, reminding Jiraiya so much of Kushina it hurt. As Jiraiya stood there, completely frozen as he watched his godson in the flesh for the first time, he missed when the dark-haired boy noticed him. It was a mistake that Jiraiya would pay for. With one word, all three genin turned to look at him. Jiraiya took a deep breath before pasting a smile on his face. Hello, kids. I am the Gria. The huge sword slammed into the ground, sending a crack in the earth rushing toward him. Whoa. I come in peace, kids. A spark of lightning arced out of a pale palm. No, seriously, I'm not Dash. Naruto held a hand out, a spiraling ball of chakra in his palm. That's the reason, Dash. The lightning got brighter, arcing threads of white and blue, and the sound of birds filled the air. Effortlessly pulling the sword out of the ground, the pink-haired girl looked Jiraiya up and down. Don't kill him. Sensei will want to talk to him. Red bled into the dark-haired kid's eyes. Jiraiya fought against the genjutsu, which was weak at best, but he realized too late it was only a distraction. Once dispelling the genjutsu, Jiraiya realized the dark-haired boy was gone. Then he felt an electric jolt of pain shooting through his body before the world went black. When Jiraiya came to, he was bound to a chair. He cracked an eye open, just to make sure there was no razor wire down near his crotch. Just some rope around his waist. That was a relief. His head felt like lead as he lifted it up, trying to get his bearings. The first thing he saw was the wood of a kitchen table with bare feet propped on top. Jiraiya's eyes followed the legs until he found the face. Sipping on coffee, Kakashi was leaning back in his chair, no mask on, just lounging. So, Kakashi sat his cup down on the table. The great Sunin, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, was defeated by 3 genin. He smirked. I bet Lady Tsunade would love to hear that. The last time Jiraiya had seen Kakashi, he was 12 years younger. A sad, angry kid who had what little he'd acquired in life ripped out from under him. 5 deaths within a short period of time, none of which he had any control over, would drive a man insane. He lost track of the kid after he left Konoha. Seeing him here, seeing him looking so calm, was a surprise. Tsunade does not need to know. Jiraiya glared at him. Could I get free, please? This is the second time within 48 hours that I've been bound. Not exactly the fun experience it sounds like. Kakashi hummed. Not yet. With a tilt of his head, Kakashi motioned toward the door. As if on cue, the three kids came inside. Oh, he's awake. The pink-haired girl leaned her huge sword, which Jiraiya could now see was the actual Kyubikurei Basho, against the wall. She hopped up on the kitchen island, swinging her feet. Do we get to ask questions, sensei? The two boys sat on the remaining chairs. That dark-haired kid, whose looks screamed Uchiha, was giving him a glare that only his clan could make. Sneaking onto our property isn't the smartest way to introduce yourself. Just staring at us like a creep, Naruto murmured, arms crossed. There was a small laugh that left Kakashi as he sat up straight. All right, kids. This is Jiraiya, one of the Sannin. Him. Naruto sounded as if he was accusing Kakashi of lying to him. No way. He didn't even fight back, sensei. The dark-haired kid rolled his eyes. He fell for a weak genjutsu. First of all, kid, I let you put that genjutsu on me, Jiraiya growled out. Second of all, yes, I am a Sannin. Before the kids could react, Kakashi held a hand up. All right, settle down. Pointing at each of the kids, Kakashi introduced them. Haruno Sakura. Uchiha Sasuke. Uzumaki Naruto. With a smirk, Kakashi added, these are the genin that knocked you out. They absolutely do not fight like genin, Kakashi. Jiraiya had been tugging at the bindings, trying to get them loose. Whoever tied him up did a damn good job. However, the man did find something else. The pain in his arm, which he had been chalking up to the way he was bound, turned out to be a bite mark. Jiraiya could actually feel the impressions of teeth in his skin. Okay. Which one of you bit me? The kids share a glance before giving Jiraiya a toothy grin. Kakashi looked over at them. Was there a good reason for it? All three nodded. Oh well, it will heal. As Jiraiya scoffed, Naruto grew bored. He had better things to do than listen to some old man prattle on. He had a seal to figure out. Grabbing a handful of the ever-present pile of paper and a pen, Naruto sat back down. The parchment he had earlier before the creep arrived, had a great base that Naruto believed could work. Now he just had to build off of it. Craning his neck, Jiraiya looks at the paper Naruto is working hard on, tongue poked out between his lips. What are you working on, kid? If Naruto heard him, he didn't acknowledge it. The boy just kept drawing runes and symbols on the paper. They looked very familiar. Are you working on a Baijuyo seal? With wide eyes, Jiraiya looked at Kakashi. What in the ever-loving fuck are you letting him do, Kakashi? What he feels like he has to. He shrugged. It's his seal. Incredulous, Jiraiya stared at Kakashi. You told him? What happened to you, Kakashi? You're not the same kid as when I left. What happened to me? The images of his students, the ones who gave their lives to give him a second chance, appeared behind Jiraiya. The old Kakashi died around the same time his other kids did. I became a Jounin sensei to 3 kids who got the short end of the stick their whole lives. Naruto was alone. He was hated for something that he had no control over. No one cared about the human boy who never had kind human contact until he was 12. Sasuke lost his entire world overnight. He dealt with more death at age 7 than I have in my entire life. The only one I didn't see lose everything was Sakura, and that's because she went to Inoichi instead of my apartment. Within days of becoming their Jounin sensei, I learned that 2 of them lived alone and the third was just kicked out of her home for wanting to be a ninja. That is what happened to me. When Kakashi breathed out, he realized he was standing inches away from the Toad Sage. 4 pairs of eyes bore into Kakashi until Jiraiya broke up the tension. Can I be untied now? Kakashi blinked. I'm losing sensation in my arms. He motioned to Sasuke, who stepped behind Jiraiya and began untying him. You did this, Uchiha? Damn. I need some air. Kakashi stood up as the ropes fell from around Jiraiya. No biting. Leaning against a tree at the edge of the forest, Kakashi took several deep breaths. If he wasn't more careful, wasn't able to hold his temper and his tongue, eventually he would out everything. It's not that Kakashi believed he could keep up the ruse forever, but he wasn't sure outing it today was a great idea. No, it was safest for Kakashi to just stand still and breathe. He let his head thud back against the bark and closed his eyes, taking a few steady breaths in and out. Panicked squeaking and trilling made Kakashi's eyes snap open. Practically leaping out of the brush came Ataka's weasel summon. The poor little mammal was breathing heavily as he wrapped around Kakashi's neck. He kept nipping at Kakashi's ear and chin, trilling and squeaking, trying to get Kakashi to understand. "Okay, Todao, calm down." The weasel didn't stop until Kakashi made it to the porch. Todao jumped on the railing, sitting up and showing the glowing seal on his stomach. "Important, huh?" The small piece of paper that landed in his hand was more than important. It was timeline altering in the most extreme way. Kisame and I defected. Going someplace safe. Watch my brother. When Kakashi threw the front door open, it was to Jiraiya looking down at Naruto's paper as he drew a seal, mumbling something. It didn't seem like Naruto heard him, or didn't care. With Todao wrapped around his neck in a furry scarf, Kakashi made his way to the table. "Jiraiya, has Tsunade met any weasels lately?" Unwrapping from his neck, Todao hopped off of him and curled around Sasuke. Kakashi passed the young boy a note. No, she healed one." The man cocked his head to the side. His eyes flicked from Sasuke, who had a nervous look about him while he stared at the piece of paper with a weasel hiding inside his high collar, and Kakashi. "You're talking about the same weasel she is, aren't you?" Kakashi nodded. "I'm assuming she came here with you. Do you know where she is?" "Hospital, probably." Sasuke's hand shot out, grabbing Kakashi's arm. Is he, where would he? You let me worry about that." Kakashi ruffled Sasuke's hair. "You help Sakura with her training." He tapped Naruto's shoulder, drawing the kid's attention. "Fresh air, Naruto. I don't care if you take the paper, but get some air." The boy reluctantly nodded. "I'll be back." Jiraiya caught up to Kakashi right as his sandals hit the grass. "You're honestly going to bring that kid here?" It wasn't a question. Kakashi didn't answer. "Sarutobi-sensei won't allow dash." Sandaime ordered Ataka to join the Akatsuki. "He doesn't get a say in this. If you want your godson to actually talk to you, you won't tell him, either." Kakashi's voice was a warning. "Lady Tsunade, he trusts her. I'm assuming the feeling is mutual." Rumors had been flying all morning that the Lady Tsunade was back in Konoha. Gossiping women all claiming they had seen her, talked to her, told her how the medical system has gone downhill without her. However, that was just tea shop gossip, nothing to take stock in. At least, the medics hoped so. In the years Tsunade had been gone, a lot of the practices she had put into place were phased out. The mental health department was nearly gone, only 2 doctors refused to completely shut it down and remained in their lonely wing. The stigma surrounding mental health, which Tsunade tried so hard to overcome, was in full force. Especially with ninja, who have been taught to be mentally strong. With everything that was changed, everything that was taken away, if the rumors of Tsunade returning were true, no one was looking forward to telling the hot-headed woman what had been happening. Then the Lady Tsunade walked through the front doors of the hospital. Immediately, the medics and nurses were in a tizzy. Some of the seasoned medics had worked under Tsunade, meaning they knew what everyone was in for. The woman was a tornado, touching down and tearing everything apart. With a notebook in hand, Shizune followed behind, writing the observations that Tsunade threw out. No one questioned her authority, they all knew she got what she wanted. Nobody would dare to tell her no. A few hours, and several full notebook pages, later, Tsunade took her place in the emergency room, healing academy students and genin who got a little too overexcited and Chiryunin who made stupid mistakes. One such wound, a compound fracture of the femur, had blood coating the hospital table. A moment of panic gripped Tsunade. Flashes of Dan laying on the dirt flashed before her. With shaking hands, Tsunade took a step back. "Lady Tsunade," Shizune put a hand on her shoulder, "you can do this." After a deep breath, Tsunade squeezed her hands into fists. She could do this. She's a Sunin. She could do this. An hour later, which only took that long because the Chiryunin was uncooperative, and Tsunade walked out of the surgery room and straight into a bathroom. Shizune followed close behind, watching as the woman peeled her gloves off and leaned over the sink. "He's healed." The bone is set. That kid will be fine. She raised her head, catching Shizun's eyes in the mirror. That kid is still alive. Of course he is. It wasn't that you couldn't heal anyone. It was that you were afraid to heal. Shizun smiled. It's good to have you back. There was a knock on the door before a young nurse peeked her head in the bathroom. Lady Tsunade, ma'am, Jiraiya is asking for you. He told me to say, he needs to talk about a weasel. The young girl shrugged. I didn't understand, but he said you would know. Thank you. Tsunade nodded. I do understand. Waiting in the lobby, Jiraiya watched Tsunade walk down the long hallway. There was a spot of blood on her sleeve, which surprised the man. She was here, in the hospital, and healing? Jiraiya had to admit to himself he worked a damn miracle. Kakashi, however, had forgotten Tsunade's fear of healing. He only learned about it secondhand from Naruto after his trip. Even then, Kakashi will admit he only half listened to the poor kid. Another thing Kakashi could have kicked himself for. As soon as Tsunade got close, Kakashi asked about Ino. I have seen her. It won't be long before she's awake. I informed Inoichi. Tsunade watched as Kakashi nodded, relieved. Jiraiya gave the woman a nod. I see you're back to healing. A small prideful smile graced Tsunade's face before she schooled it again. I'm assuming we need privacy for this conversation. The men nodded. Follow me. She led them into a conference room complete with privacy seals. Once activated, she turned on the guys again. Is he okay? He and his partner departed from their former job. Tsunade's eyes widened at Kakashi's answer. I'm not sure where they're going, but dash. A pale hand hit the table slightly too hard. That isn't a question. He comes here. Tsunade, they can't. Jiraiya's eyes were wide as he watched Tsunade. Sensei would never dash. She locked her gaze on him. Sensei caused this, Jiraiya. Danzo put Itaki in the middle of a situation he had no part in, and Sensei made him a rogue ninja. As I said, it's not a question. He comes here. She flicked her eyes at Kakashi. How secure is your new home? Naruto's been placing seals all over. They worked good enough to confuse Sandaime Zumbu. I'm sure they could be tweaked to be stronger. Nodding, Tsunade crossed her arms. She looked over at Shizun, who nodded back. You have a way to contact him. A weasel, actually. Tsunade snorted. I'll send the message out as soon as I get home. He'd barely put his hand on the knob before Tsunade stopped him. Both of them, Kakashi. After running for 48 hours straight, minimal breaks taken only when absolutely necessary, Kisame and Itaka finally found a place semi-hidden. An old, beat-down shack hidden in the middle of thick trees was literally stumbled upon. The wood was covered in vines and moss, the door hanging crooked supported by one hinge, windows long since broken out. It was good enough to take a seat and plan out their next move. The crows surrounded the shack, watching for anything out of the ordinary. So far, they were lucky. Either Zetsu was busy chasing the various crows and clones, or Obito didn't order anyone to chase them. It was Kisame who forced the duo to stop. The fast pace, along with minimal breaks, pushed the lungs that Tsunade just healed. As soon as Itaka began breathing heavily, Kisame made them take a small break. Now, however, with no sleep, Itaka was beginning to get sluggish, nearly missing branches and constantly squinting. Concerned for Itaka's health, he ordered them to the ground. As soon as they found the shack, Kisame sent water clones out for something to eat. They came back with 2 skeins of water and a couple of fish. How are you feeling? Kisame broached the subject as he dampened the small fire. Before you lie to me, your breathing was heavy and you were squinting. So, I'll ask again, how are you feeling? Itaka smirked. My eyes always get blurry towards evening. Even with Lady Tsunade's healing, I will go blind eventually. As for my lungs, you are correct that my breathing was heavier than normal. However, I'm feeling better than I have in a long time. He took a long sip of his water. They sat in silence, listening for anything out of the ordinary, or for Samehada to react to foreign chakra. It was quiet. Just wild animals running around and the sound of a stream where they'd gotten the water. Blissfully quiet, Why aren't they chasing us? Leaning back against the wall, Itake motioned to the crows out the window. I sent several crows in several different directions. They will leave false clues, leading Zetsu far away. When the crows feel they are far enough away, they will stop and transform into us. They will let Zetsu, Itake paused to use finger quotes, kill us, leaving behind another clue. The teen looked so proud of himself. It will burn a couple of safe houses I have, but it will keep us safe. There was a long pause before Kisame let out a booming laugh. You had this planned for quite a while, didn't you? Of course. Closing his eyes and letting his head fall back against the wall, Itake had a small smile on his face as Kisame chuckled to himself. They enjoyed a moment of peace before squeaking and trilling could be heard outside. Wriggling through a crack in the wooden walls, a weasel ran across the floor. Kisame stood up, reaching for Samehada, but Itake stopped him. The weasel hopped on Itake's lap, sitting up on his hind legs. This is Todeo. Itake motioned toward the weasel. He's a summon, Kisame. A brush of chakra and his pale hand held a piece of parchment. His dark eyes flicked over the words written there, then read them twice more. Kisame, we are unofficially invited to Konoha. Both of us. There was a beat before Kisame sat straight up. You're fucking kidding me? It took Shikamaru one day to get the basic shadow imitation field technique down. By the next evening, he could properly control it. Soon after, he could mix other jutsu in. Surprisingly, it didn't take a lot of chakra to make it work, just a lot of control. Especially when he added in something like shadow clutch or shadow stitching. Although getting better, control was still a slight issue. It was an issue that could be easily corrected with some more training. Koji was a wonderful sparring partner, immensely helpful, but Shikamaru needed someone who could come at him in the air. Someone who wouldn't be too busy training for the finals themselves and could help him. When discussing who would be perfect, Koji had mentioned Kiba. His signature jutsu, Fang over Fang, would come at him in the air. It was fast, precise, and powerful. The perfect practicing opportunity. Out the window, Shikaka watched his son complete a jutsu that he never could. He could hear them talking about a classmate, about finding where teammate practiced. His son wanted to challenge himself. That was something Shikaka very much wanted to see in person. Waiting until his son and Koji were far enough away they wouldn't notice him, Shikaka slowly followed behind. During their walk, Shikamaru thought through his upcoming fight. There were multiple sparring sessions with Koji that ended with Shikamaru trapping him in the shadows. But Koji fights from the ground. Sasuke tends to mix a lot of jumping and dodging into his fighting style. Shikamaru cursed the Uchiha style and its fluidity. Not only that, but Sasuke had a natural skill with ninja tools and ninja wire. And he had Naruto making him paper bombs that are stronger than normal. If he was going to be prepared, Shikamaru needed someone who can fight while being fast and in the air. They found the training field Team 8 normally occupies. Shikamaru asked Kiba for one thing, come at him, directly, with Fang over Fang. There was a gasp from Hinata, and Shino questioned his sanity. Shikamaru laughed, explaining he did not have a death wish, he had a plan. Kiba just shrugged. It's your funeral. Dropping to one knee, an inky black circle pooled out from around Shikamaru. It stretched out, thin, hugging the dirt until it nearly reached Kiba's sandals. With a boisterous voice, Kiba called to Akamaru. They took their stance, ready to go. Shikamaru gave them a sharp nod. Kiba and Akamaru came spinning at him. Shikamaru waited until they were in range. Hands shot out of the pool of shadows, frantically trying to grab at the two drill shapes in the air. He had specifically told them not to stop, no matter how close they got to him, no matter how much he could get hurt. For once, Kiba listened. The arms became more frantic as Shikamaru tried to grab a hold of something, anything that could slow them down. At the last second, Shikamaru slipped into the shadows, letting Kiba and Akamaru hit the ground behind him. Shikamaru slipped back out of the shadows, scratching his head. Shit. What was he doing wrong? Akamaru trotted over to him, cocking his head as he took the boy in. I'm alright, Akamaru. He leaned down to pat the small dog on the head. Back to the drawing board. Kiba asked with a smirk. Looks like that didn't quite work out. You're not fast enough. No. Shikamaru knew he could do this. He'd nearly mastered an S-class jutsu in 2 days. He could do this. Again. Kiba looked at him like he was insane. No, seriously, Kiba. Again. I know what I did wrong. As they took their stances again, Shikamaru took a deep breath in and out. He was being too impatient. The ki wasn't being faster. It wasn't frantically grabbing at the two as they came barreling toward him. It was waiting for the right moment. It was letting them come to him. There was a thing that Iruka used to prattle on and on about. Shikamaru slept through most of the lectures, but some of it did slip in. Battle calm he'd called it. Iruka told them all it was difficult to explain, yet Nidame seemed to have mastered it. As cryptic as the explanation was, Iruka had told them how Nidame explained it. When you're calm of mind, when you're entirely focused on your opponent, you will enter a zone where everything around you disappears. The only thing you can see, hear, feel, smell, taste will be the fight at hand. That is battle calm. As Akamaru and Kiba came spinning toward him, Shikamaru focused entirely on them. He watched as the two got closer and closer and closer. It was almost as if everything was in slow motion. The shadow hand shot out of the darkness that surrounded him, catching one of them in midair. A second hand shot out, catching the other. Held still, the spinning fizzled out until he was only holding a still and exhausted duo. Shadow clutching jutsu complete. From his position still held in the air, Kiba yelled down, "Dude, what? That was amazing." He looked at Akamaru. "What the hell was that, man? You actually caught us." Feeling very proud of himself, Shikamaru gently sat the two on the ground before releasing the jutsu. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Shikamaru looked up to see his father standing there. "Shikamaru, I am very proud of you. Mastering an S-rank jutsu in 2 days is remarkable. I am not afraid to say you may be the strongest Nara to have been born." What? He stood up, looking his father in the face. "What are you talking about?" Shikaka huffed out a laugh. "I can't do it, Shikamaru. I've tried for years, but I could never get this jutsu to work for me." He smiled down at his son, who just gaped at him. "Come on, let's go get your mother and celebrate." As they passed the group of kids, Shikaka called Koji to join them. With a large smile, Kurane clapped her hands together as the trio walked out of view. "Isn't that wonderful?" She looked at her 3 students. "You all have the ability to be stronger than your predecessors. Make it a reality. The only limit to your talent is how far you are willing to push it." Hiking a thumb in Shikamaru's direction, she added, "If even a Nara can overcome their naturally lazy personality, then anything can happen." That evening, as Kakashi made dinner, Jiraiya leaned against the kitchen island. "So, any tips for talking to the kid?" First of all, Kakashi quickly checked the rice. "Don't call him the kid. He has a name, as you well know. Second of all, don't patronize him. Naruto didn't have it easy and it taught him to read people. He knows if you're lying, or telling a half-truth. And, above all else, do not pity him. He absolutely hates that." Jiraiya nodded along, watching Naruto swinging through the window. "If you want an in, help him with Fuinjutsu." There was a tense look on Jiraiya's face. "You know that he's messing with something dangerous." "The Kyuubi dash." "Kurama." The Jounin pointed a wooden spoon at Jiraiya. "The Kyuubi's name is Kurama." At Jiraiya's confused look, Kakashi gave a humorless chuckle. "The seal is failing. Minato-sensei isn't here to keep it strong, and you left. Naruto can talk to him, can go into the mindscape at will." The rattling of chains could be heard through the screen door as Naruto stood up. He was barely looking where he was walking when he came into the house. "Sensei, can I get a snack before dinner?" Kakashi threw him a granola bar, watching as the kid caught it without his eyes leaving the paper in front of him. "Thanks." Jiraiya looked from Kakashi to Naruto, trying to think of a way to begin the conversation. When it seemed like Naruto was going to walk back out onto the porch, Jiraiya cleared his throat. Ki Naruto, I learned Fuinjutsu from your mother." Blue eyes snapped to his. "If you tell me what you're trying to do, maybe I can help. There was uncertainty in those blue eyes as Naruto looked between Kakashi and Jiraiya, but the Chunin held strong. This was something he could do, some way to start a dialogue with his godson. Now it was just up to the boy. I have 3 seals to figure out before the end of the month. Sasuke's, mine, and Gaara's. Naruto paused, gauging the old man's reaction. Jiraiya just nodded. Gaara's seal was put on wrong. The failsafe that should have kept their consciousness separated is missing. Orochimaru put a curse seal on Sasuke. He can't use his chakra or he gets shooting pains in his shoulder. I can't use chakra because Kurama's leaks out. He handed Jiraiya the piece of paper he's been messing around with. Can you help me with any of that? Sitting down at the table, Jiraiya slowly read over what Naruto already had. The kid had a strong base. At the core, it could hold Baijuyo chakra. There were a couple of things missing, runes and symbols in the corners of the paper with notes as to what they could be used for. For the most part, he was on the right track. The last person he knew who learned Fuinjutsu this fast was Minato. Did you get the base from your own seal? Naruto nodded. All of this looks great, except that rune here. It means inhibit. I get what you're going for, but sometimes it can cause chakra to get, what's a good word? Stuck? Backed up? Basically, kid, with chakra this powerful, it could cause the seal to overload, entirely fry it out. Jiraiya huffed out a laugh. You won't believe how many seals I burned out due to putting this in the array. To put that on a Baijuyo seal, kid, are you okay? Naruto was staring ahead, unseeing, his mouth set in a straight line. The look he had, it was one Jiraiya had seen plenty of times. Minato got that look when he found something that needed his full concentration. Learning Fuinjutsu and creating the Rasengan caused him to get that intense look quite often. It was as if Jiraiya stepped back in time, seeing it on Naruto's face. The kid may have had Kushina's mannerisms, but in this he was 100% Minato. Baijuyo chakra can overload, it was a whisper. As if he was afraid if he said it too loud, the idea would leave him. Then, as if there was a fire under him, Naruto jumped up off the chair. Baijuyo chakra can overload a seal. Kakashi and Jiraiya shared a look, not sure why that was so exciting. When Naruto didn't get a response, he just got more animated. No, you don't get it. Baijuyo chakra can burn out a seal. Any seal. Sasuke's seal. Kakashi opened and closed his mouth several times before remembering the rice. Jiraiya just blinked at the kid, wondering how his mind jumped from the 2 points. Without thinking, Jiraiya shook his head and said, "You are so much like your mother." Naruto didn't hear it, he was too busy bouncing beside Kakashi, words coming out a mile a minute. Wiping his hands on a towel, Kakashi leaned down in front of Naruto. "Kiddo, listen to me." He put his hands on Naruto's shoulders. The boy settled down. "Talk to Kurama. See what he thinks." Before Naruto could say anything, Kakashi added, "I know you can do it, Naruto. There's no question about it. Seeing as how we will be using his chakra, it would be nice to ask Kurama his opinion." "I mean, yeah, you got a point, sensei." Naruto went to the living room, flopping himself down on the couch. He took up the position to drop into the mindscape. As soon as he opened his eyes and saw the dark, wet room, Kurama's voice boomed out, "No, brat." "What? Why not?" With the water sloshing around his ankles, Naruto stepped toward the massive bars. "We could save Sasuke." A sharp claw jutted out between the bars, poking Naruto in the chest. "Too much chakra, and it could kill him." "You don't exactly have good control of my chakra, brat. I'd rather not put up with you if your kindred gets hurt. If you help me, then the chakra won't be so out of control." Naruto bat the claw away. "Besides, I've been handling it better. The clones aren't in pain when I summon them." There was a long pause as Kurama weighed his options. If he said no, put his foot down, Naruto would probably just try it on his own. That would, almost certainly, end with the Uchiha severely hurt. If Kurama helped, at least held his chakra back so Naruto only got a trickle, it would still overload the seal that snake-like man created. This so-called curse seal was a sorry excuse for a seal. He'd watched Kushina make better ones while still in the academy. It will hurt, brat. Your kindred will be in a lot of pain. Are you willing to deal with that? Yes. Kurama took in the raw determination in the boy's blue eyes. As he agreed to help, all Kurama could think was how Komei would laugh at him for becoming so soft for a human. If Komei asks, "You tricked me into helping, you got that?" Before Tsunade left the hospital for the night, she did one more round to check on some of the more injured or sick patients. As she stopped in front of the room the young Yamanaka resided, Tsunade was surprised to see not Inoichi, but a young, pink-haired girl. Visiting hours are almost over. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to see her. I haven't been here in a couple of days. The young girl had her hands on the blonde girl's arm. I'm sorry, I'll go. When she turned around, and Tsunade saw those bright green eyes, she was hit with the words from a nurse. They had told her how talented a young girl with pink hair and green eyes was. How she excelled in a short time. Wait a minute, girl. Tsunade tilted her head, looking the girl over. Have you been training here? It took a moment for the girl to answer. She looked shocked as she stood there. Oh, yeah. I was before the Chunin exams started. They tell me you're talented, that you pick healing up quickly. Tsunade put a hand on her hip. What's your name? The girl just blinked at her before answering. Sakura, ma'am. They talk about me. Before Tsunade could answer, Shizune swept in the room behind her. Lady Tsunade, I have your, oh, hello again. Shizune gave Sakura a small smile. You know her? Tsunade arched a delicate blonde eyebrow. Shizune eagerly nodded. In Kabuki town, when I healed that boy's arm. This girl had already begun healing it. She brought back nerve endings, Lady Tsunade. Really? The older woman looked Sakura up and down. What made you want to heal? Digging through her pouch, Sakura pulled out the well-read book Kakashi had given her all those months ago. Sensei gave me your book, ma'am. I've read it so many times. Ino and we started training here at the hospital. She gave Tsunade a small smile. So, you made me want to learn. How is your teammate? Shizune asked, stepping around Tsunade. Is his arm okay? As the two got into a conversation about a boy's arm, Tsunade had her eyes trained on that book. She'd written that years ago, what felt like a whole lifetime ago, with Jiraiya's help. Now it was in some wide-eyed girl's hands, inspiring a whole new generation. There was so much more she wanted to say, so much more she wanted to teach, but she never got around to writing a second book. In fact, she'd left Konoha before she gave herself the chance. The words Shizune was saying barely filtered in her mind until the woman mentioned Sakura bringing back nerve endings. Wait. You did what? She had begun to heal the dead nerve endings, ma'am. Shizune looked very proud of the girl. I was surprised that most of my work was already done. They just needed a final push. To say that Tsunade was surprised was an understatement. The young girl stayed in her mind well after they left the hospital and Tsunade crawled in bed that night. A girl with nearly perfect chakra control, a quick study, and a natural knack for healing? Interesting. Although not ready to stop training, Sasuke did trudge up the stairs and into the front door when Kakashi yelled for him. Immediately, Naruto had a hold of his arm, pulling him into the living room. The blonde was a bundle of energy, bouncing on the balls of his feet. What, idiot? I think I can, well, Kurama can, that old guy dash. Naruto was interrupted by Jiraiya's barked out hey, kid. That old guy said Baijuyo Chakra can overload a seal. Any seal. So, Kurama and we talked it over and he thinks it will work. He said it's gonna hurt, though. Sasuke just blinked at him. Baijuyo Chakra can overload a seal. You would think that one would be used to Naruto's erratic way of explaining things after living with him for a while. Speaking Naruto was a difficult language to learn. It took a lot of reading between the lines. Are you saying he can overload the seal I have? Yes. Naruto practically vibrated in place. It would totally remove it. Like, burn it off. There was a worried look in Sakura's eyes, who had recently come back from the hospital, as she glanced between the two boys. Naruto, you still can't control the chakra, though. Kurama's gonna help. Something about holding it all and letting me pull just a little bit out. He said it's a pathetic excuse for a seal that won't take much to destroy. The excitement Naruto showed was contagious. Sakura looked like she wasn't as nervous about the idea after seeing how happy the blonde was. Looking at Kakashi, Sasuke wanted his opinion. In response, Kakashi smiled and nodded. All right, Naruto. Let's do this. Before anyone could speak, however, Kakashi added, after dinner. There wasn't much eating actually done. Kakashi may as well have saved his breath. At one point much of the food was moved onto the kitchen island, replaced by papers, pens, and, to Jiraiya's surprise, Minato's old Fuinjutsu book. Kid, how did you get that? Jiraiya leaned forward, tapping the book. That's Dash. The look Naruto leveled him with made Jiraiya flinch. Yes. I am fully aware of who this book belonged to. Can we get back to saving Sasuke, now? The old man looked chastised. Kid. Tell that old pervert you need an isolation seal. Kurama said I need an isolation seal. Jiraiya blinked at him. You actually can talk to him. Naruto just rolled his eyes. Fine. 2 hours later, when the sun had just begun to drop behind the trees, everything was finally ready. On the floor of Naruto's bedroom were 2 long sealing scrolls. Brushed on in careful black brush strokes were the symbols and runes that create an isolation seal. Chakra the strength of a Byakuya required, at the very least, 2 of them. They lay across each other, making a giant X on the hardwood. In the center, Sasuke was on his knees, shirtless. Across his pale skin were lines of black ink, curling on his neck, shoulder, and down his back. Spirals of arrays and lines that create a channel, directing Kurama's chakra into the curse seal and making sure it goes nowhere else. The entire ordeal was based on Kurama's instinct and Jiraiya's knowledge. Okay. Naruto had gone over the seal again and again. It had to be perfect. Just a reminder, once I start, it will be Kurama in charge. He took a step back, sitting down in the meditation pose that old Sunin showed him, eyes closed, legs crossed, and fists lightly pressed together. It helped the strong chakra flow correctly through his body. Jiraiya activated the containment seal. The black ink on the scrolls glowed a bright green, reflecting off of every surface. The containment seal was a failsafe. In the off case that any of Orochimaru's chakra attempted to escape, the green glow would trap it. Crimson chakra bubbled out of Naruto. It was so different than the terrible mix of blue and red that leaks out in times of stress. There was none of Naruto's soft blue inside. It was pure Byakuya chakra, raw and terrifying. The room quietly rumbled under the stress of it. Let's get this over with. A chill shot through Sasuke as those words echoed from nowhere. That wasn't Naruto's voice. Naruto wasn't in charge anymore. The only thing that kept Sasuke sitting still was knowing, somewhere inside, Naruto was still there. He knew, without a doubt, that Naruto would not allow Sasuke to be harmed. One hand landed on each of Sasuke's shoulders, sending something semi-liquid and acidic over his shoulders and down his body. It burned. A bone-deep ache that had Sasuke gritting his teeth. Cracking an eye open, Sasuke looked down at his legs to see the crimson chakra enveloping his entire body. His fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, making Sasuke want to run. The chakra was foreign, painful, terrifying, but there was a soft warmth on his shoulders where Naruto's hands were. No, Sasuke was safe. Knowing that Naruto has been dealing with this chakra, had slept through it, kept Sasuke from crying out. Kurama directed the chakra through the channels written all over Sasuke's shoulder and back, making the black writing turn red. The curse seal waved and pulsed, fighting against the Byakuya chakra that was slowly seeping in. Violet chakra began seeping out of Sasuke's neck. It felt as if his whole left side was being ripped apart. He tried as hard as he could, but the pain was too unbearable. Sasuke screamed. The red chakra clashed with the violet, a push and pull that rocked the room, making things fall from Naruto's shelves. If it wasn't for the hands on Sasuke's shoulders, the boy would have fallen over. The screaming subsided, but the pain left him lethargic. Whatever Naruto had done to the seal in the forest, it kept the seal from spreading too far. So, instead of width, the seal went for depth. Kurama growled as he felt the violet chakra curling around a Tenketsu. At least it had only reached one before Naruto had stopped the progress. That Tenketsu may have been entirely destroyed while pulling out the violet chakra had there not been Baijuyo chakra holding it together. The gentle healing power kept Sasuke's chakra system from breaking down. Oi! Pervert! Now! Jiraiya grumbled about respect but did what Kurama was asking. A push of chakra into the containment seal and the violet chakra was pulled inside the ink, sealing it with a sizzling sound. Sasuke's head lolled to the side as all the fight washed out of him. Then everything went quiet. The red chakra slowly receded back inside of Naruto. The green glow of the containment seal slowly faded out. Naruto blinked, the red that had taken over his eyes drained out until they were ocean blue once again. Sasuke, with his eyes closed and breathing labored, slid through Naruto's hands and thudded against his chest. His pale neck was completely unmarked as it was before the forest. Sakura let out a breath she had been holding. Is it over? She watched as Kakashi slid into the room, holding Naruto from falling backward as his strength faded out, also. I think so, Pinky. Jiraiya patted her on the head. Need some help, Kakashi? He tilted his head toward Naruto's bed. Just lay them both in there. They'll be fine. Jiraiya had a strange look on his face but did as Kakashi said. It was dark in the safe house. A gentle silence settled over the whole building. With his sketchbook in hand, Sai sat at the kitchen table underneath a dull lamplight. Setting on the wooden tabletop sat Sai's recently painted Umbu mask. Beautiful colors of blue, purple, red, and green swirled over the ceramic. It may have been more detailed than the others, but Sai couldn't help himself. The mask he'd picked up was almost entirely faded. It gave the artistic kid plenty of chances to use his imagination. Kid, why are you awake? Sai looked up to see the man who brought them to the safe house. Are you okay? Sai gave him a forced smile. Yes, Tenzo-senpai. I just wanted to draw. Across the table, Tenzo settled into a chair. Sai, right? I'm trying to learn all of your names. The boy nodded before returning to his sketching. The pen made feathered lines, forming a small shack surrounded by trees. Wrapping from behind the shack came a river, snaking through the trees and dropping off into a waterfall. Is that somewhere you've seen before? Shin and I lived there. A couple of fish were drawn jumping out of the water. You trained with Lord Danzo, right? That's what Ori told us. Running a fingernail over the wood grain, Tenzo nodded. Yeah. I was trained before he started letting two live together. Did Danzo tell you about a graduation exam? No. Shin told me. He said we would have to fight each other to the death. I'm glad we didn't do that. I wouldn't want to kill Shin. He's my brother. The young boy looked so sad, his mouth turned down in a frown. I don't want to kill my brother. Sitting forward, Tenzo reached an arm out and placed his hand on Sai's. You don't have to. Danzo was a terrible man. He did terrible things. But you're safe now. Tenzo gave him a small smile. From now on, you and Shin won't be separated. That would be nice. Again, Sai gave him a fake smile. Tenzo picked up the mask, running his thumb over the extravagant paint job. This is fancy. Did you paint this? Yes, sir. I like to paint and draw. Is this okay? Am I allowed? The boy gripped the pen so tight Tenzo feared it would break. Whoa, kid. Of course you are allowed to draw or paint or whatever you want to do. He watched as Sai released the tension he was holding. Your sketchbook looks like it's getting full. We can get you another one. With wide eyes, Sai stared at Tenzo like he'd given him a present. Really? I found this one. Lord Danzo let me keep it, but just because it helps with my ninjutsu. I had to be punished for taking it, though. Tenzo could only imagine what that punishment entailed. Of course, kid. Anything else you need? Paints? Pens? Charcoal? As Sai rambled out a list of supplies he would like to have, Tenzo tried to keep his focus. His mind kept drifting to what punishment Danzo would have subjected that boy to. Just for finding a sketchbook. How many scars did this boy have? It wasn't the first time, and it probably wouldn't be the last time, but Tenzo was glad Danzo was dead. Notes. Check the description for the links to the author.